Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of TPTOC. Behind every great board game, there is a mechanism, but behind every great mechanism, there is a story. This is the Periodic Table of Components, the podcast where we unpack the history, science, and secrets hidden inside your favorite tabletop games. I'm your host, Greg, and today we're setting up the table for a game that takes us into the souls of ancient civilizations. From welcoming other clans from nearby roads into your camps, to marching for allegiances and preparing for battles, all the way to building wonders. This is the story of the sometimes four-legged gods and their cultural impacts on bringing some of the most iconic civilizations to their glory. We are going to be deconstructing the elements of Spirited and tell you if the mechanisms integrate with the theme of rising empires and wild deities. In Spirited, 1 to 6 players will be competing to be the empire that deserves the most spirit cast upon by the gods by building allegiances, wonders, and an army to demolish the enemy in battle. Spirited is a multi-use card hand management civilization-like game, and I mean that very, very loosely. It is designed by S.J. McDonald, Shim Phillips, and Zach Smith, and published by Garphill Games in 2026. I am absolutely going to butcher the following names, but we're going to push through and see what happens here. So we have Patry Balanovsky, Mihailo Dmitrovsky, also known as the Miko, and I think listeners may understand why, and Sam Phillips provided their talent for the art. So yes, those were the 3 artists for this game. The art in the game is going to bring life by depicting anthropomorphized animals that are in the style of humans and are essentially humanized. These are animal warriors that are historically significant to their respective civilizations. That's what this game is all about. You have a civilization you're going to be running, and you're going to be represented by different animals in the game. Spirited plays 1 to 6 players. The Board Game Geek community states that it is best at 2 to 3 players. The average time to play this game is going to be 40 to 80 minutes, and it's recommended for those 13 years and older. The average complexity weight, according to BGG, is a solid 2.0, so not very heavy. And common mechanisms you'll find within this game are things like hand management, multi-use cards, push your luck, set collection, and variable player powers. Who doesn't like variable player powers? Now, some of you out there may prefer to play some of these games digitally if you're not able to get it to the table, so I'm going to offer you some options here. This game is available for digital play on Tabletop Simulator and Board Game Arena. There are some expansions that have been put out for this game, and those are the Mediterranean expansion and the American expansion. I'm only going to focus on the base game today. Just like to include that information for the listeners, that if you decide you do enjoy this game, I encourage you to go out and check out the expansions, because they're going to add a lot more animals to the game. When I say animals there, that means different civilizations that are going to be added to the game by those expansions. Essentially, they're just card packs. So yeah, go check those out if you're interested in that. Those are the highlights of the game in general today, but there is much, much more ahead. So let's start getting into it. Today we're going to be looking at the game breakdown, This is where we're going to set the scene for the overall gameplay and dive into the history of it. We're going to get into the history of animal deities that are represented by those civilizations in this game, and talk about how they influence the leaders of the past and raising their empires to greatness. The art and presentation in this game is a big part of bringing the theme out, so I'm asking you, the listener, if you are checking this game out, take a moment to realize the work that was put into the art and presentation and how that's going to help you bring the theme out when playing this game. So the majority of the history that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be dedicated to those animal deities, or essentially the animals that these clans worshipped in ancient history. So that's going to be my focus, and we'll kind of get into how that goes in with the theme. So if you like badass animals that are ready to slice each other up, then you found the right place here today. We'll then get into the rules of the game, followed by the mechanical integration of the theme. We'll finish up with the final verdict, where we rate all these on the thematic scale, and then this is hopefully going to help you decide if this is the game for you and your group to tell your next story around the table. So if this is your first time here at TPTOC, our thematic scale is the rating system, where we rate the thematic integrations of gameplay on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being the theme is completely pasted on, hardly no theme at all. 2 is there are some surface level dressings of the theme, but not really there. 3 is mid-tier for me. It has functional harmony with the theme generally coming through. 4 I only give to those that are deeply immersive. And a very, very, very rare 5 is going to be for a narrative masterpiece. Alright, before we get too far, thanks for joining in today, and hope you guys enjoy learning about these fascinating empires and the gameplay and mechanisms of Spirited. So without further ado, let's get suited up here and get into the game breakdown. Welcome to the game breakdown here. Alright, so if you've played Spirited before, you know it captures the feeling of a civilization-like game in a shorter playtime with card combos and some push your luck stuff going on. You may have heard me say civilization-like. I'm going to keep using that term. I do know it's not a civilization game truly, but obviously that's the theme they're going for in this game. So I'm going to call it a civilization-like game. If you haven't played Spirited before, that's alright. I don't think you really need to know the game beforehand to really understand and enjoy the history of it. But hopefully by the end of this podcast, that'll change and you'll have a better understanding of how it plays. And most importantly, if it's going to be right for you and your collection. Alright, today I'm going to break down the history of what we call Zoolatry and how these civilizations in this game, Spirited, are represented by their corresponding animal deities, or animals that played a major role in their culture. So, Spirited, all of the factions in the game are represented by different animals, and this is clearly, in my opinion, what they're kind of going for. They took some historical context of these animals and that history within that certain culture and have applied it to some of the card effects and the mechanisms and obviously the theme. So that's what we're going to focus on. And the 12 factions in the base game, we're going to actually take some time and dive into the history of how they worship these specific animals, and a little bit of history of that specific empire. The history segment might be a little bit longer than usual, I'm expecting, just because there's so much information there on these empires, but I found this topic pretty fascinating, so I kind of dove deep into it. But I hope you guys are here and will enjoy the longer episode than usual. What I found really interesting as I was diving into this board game and the historical context behind it is that I found a lot of similarities between these civilizations, even though they may be thousands of years or even thousands of miles apart. So under this context of zoolatry, we'll find some similarities between these civilizations, which I thought was pretty interesting. Also in the game, we are going to be building wonders, so I do want to take a moment during this podcast episode to talk about those wonders, so we'll touch on those briefly. But before we get too far into the weeds of the factions, let's just first start off by listing the 12 factions in the game and the specific animals that represent these factions. So we are going to start there. Alright, we're going to start with the Aztecs. The Aztecs are represented in this game by a snake, more specifically a rattlesnake. Then we have the Babylonians of ancient Iraq, which are represented by a lion. The Chinese Empire are a panda. Ancient Egypt is represented by the crocodile. Ancient Greece is an owl. Japan is represented by the Shiba Inu, the dog. Representing the Norse Empire of ancient Europe is the raven. The Olmec Empire of ancient Mexico is represented by the jaguar. In the ancient Middle East, we have the Persians, which are brought to life by a bull. And then we have Rome, which is represented by a wolf. And in ancient Africa, the Sao Empire is a hyena. And finally, we have the Scythians, which are represented by an eagle. So now we know the civilizations and animals we are going to look into. Let's first talk about the term for worshiping animals and or holding them to a deistic-like reverence, and that is zoolatry. Now, if you like weird history, internet memes, and anthropomorphic animals that are ready to battle, then I think you're going to really enjoy the history of the podcast today. So let's go ahead and roll right into it. Let's start off by learning about the term zoolatry. This concept, it might sound completely bizarre to modern ears, but was once the absolute bedrock of human spirituality across the globe. Imagine walking into a massive gold-adorned temple thousands of years ago, but instead of bowing down to a statue of a human king or an invisible force in the sky, you're actually bowing down to a living, breathing crocodile, or a falcon, or a cat, or any other type of animal. This is the practice of zoolatry, which many ancient people practiced in the ancient world. Simply put, zoolatry is the practice of worshiping animals within a religious context. But it's not just about thinking animals are cute or respecting nature. It was much deeper than that. This term encompasses everything from treating specific animal species as divine beings to performing sacred rituals involving them to worshiping literal animal deities. Think about it this way. To our ancestors, animals weren't just resources, they were mirrors of the divine themselves. Historically, if you were to look back at the world's greatest ancient empires, zoolatry, like I said before, was everywhere, even miles and miles apart. The ancient Egyptians, the Minoans, and early Indus Valley civilizations, they all incorporated animal worship into their core belief systems. But why? Why a beast instead of a human? Well, animals represented the ultimate pure forms of concepts humans were obsessed with. A lion wasn't just a predator, it was the literal embodiment of raw power and kingship. A bull wasn't just livestock, it was the ultimate symbol of fertility and earth-shattering strength. Other animals, like the jackal or the vulture, were seen as sacred protectors or guides through the afterlife. By worshiping the animal, humans felt they could actually connect with or even channel those primal forces. The game Spirited here, it uses this concept of zoolatry for the overall thematic presentation and art of the civilizations in this game. So now you know why these mascots aren't just cool art that the designers added for no reason. Let's get into the specifics of each of these, and we are first going to explore the Aztec Empire. So the Aztecs, they are represented as snakes in this game. The artist rendering of this snake is what I can only assume to be a rattlesnake by the artist's depiction. But yeah, it's a rattlesnake and it's wearing traditional Aztec garments you would expect from this time period. Snakes played a wide variety of roles in the Aztec society and culture in the ancient world. Before we get too far, it's important to know that the Aztecs were a Mesoamerican civilization that flourished in central Mexico from 1300 to 1521. The Aztec culture was deeply spiritual, and they worshipped many gods that had serpent inspiration. Snakes in the Aztec Empire were far more than mere animals. They were profound symbols of renewal, fertility, and cosmic boundaries. From molting their skin to navigating multiple realms, serpents represented life's cyclical nature and the Earth's vital forces. Now I'm going to screw this up, but in Nahuatl, which I believe it's pronounced, was the language spoken by the Mexica. The word for serpent is actually similar to that, which is coatl. They represented a vast spectrum of cosmic forces, including creation, destruction, rain, fire, and the sky. Why did the Aztecs hold serpents in such high regard? To understand this, we are going to have to look at their foundational worldview. First, snakes were viewed as powerful symbols of transformation and cyclical rebirth. Think about it for a second. Snakes shed and molt their old skin, emerging completely renewed. To the Aztecs, this was a powerful living metaphor for eternal life and the continuous cycles of time. Second, serpents were seen as cosmic intermediaries. Because of their extreme mobility, snakes were the ultimate boundary crossers. They slither on the ground, burrow deep into the ocean, and even swim in the water. Because of this, they were revered as liaisons that could move freely between the earthly human realm and the divine spirit worlds. This brings us to the core of the Aztec religion, divine duality. Like I said before, many of their major deities possessed serpentine traits. They have a deity called the Quetzalcoatl. It is the famous feathered serpent. It is a creator deity associated with wind, wisdom, and learning. Then they also have another one, Coatlicue, the fearsome earth mother goddess of life and death. And Coatlicue is often depicted in art wearing a skirt made of writhing snakes and a necklace of severed hands and hearts. And this was beautifully embodying both creation and destruction. Snakes were also deeply connected to power and agriculture. Their liquid-like sinuous movement associated them with two of the most vital, life-giving forces in the empire. That was rain and flowing blood. These elements were deemed absolutely essential to human survival and agricultural fertility. In fact, this reverence for the serpent goes even farther back. Anthropologists believe snakes likely began to be revered as sacred symbols in this society as early as 2000 BCE in the Mesoamerican societies. Because of this intense spiritual weight, serpent imagery was everywhere. The Aztecs frequently incorporated snakes into their art and jewelry, pretty much wearing them as talismans to physically connect themselves with cosmic energy and divine forces. That was the Aztecs. Now, let's take a look at the Babylonians and their associated animal, which is the lion. Looking at the art for the anthropomorphic lion, you will see a character who is obviously supposed to be a warrior. He's holding a spiked club, which these are also called morning stars. So just imagine this: it's a lion just looking tough and as a warrior. Pretty much these lions were seen as symbols of tough badassery in ancient Babylon. So I'm just going to paint the picture there. So the Babylonian Empire was an influential ancient Mesopotamian civilization centered in the fertile regions between the Tigris and Euphrates. And yes, this is obviously a real place. It's not just a board game. I'm talking about the Kinesia game, Tigris and Euphrates, but this was actual place of the Babylonian Empire, which is in modern-day Iraq. So famous for its monumental architecture, foundational legal systems, and early scientific contributions, it peaked in two distinct historical eras. It was the Old Babylonian Empire, and then the other one is the Neo-Babylonian Empire. But lions played a major role in both. Lions in the Babylonian Empire symbolized divine power, protection, and kingship. As the sacred animal of Ishtar, one of their deities, they guarded gates to ward off evil, embodying the king's ultimate duty to defeat the forces of chaos and maintain civilization. In Babylon, the lion was far more than a predator. It was the ultimate symbol of divine power, protection, and royal authority. For the Babylonians, the king's ability to conquer or harness these magnificent animals symbolized the triumph of order over untamed nature. But to really understand the lion's significance, we have to look at the goddess who claimed it as her own. The lion was the primary sacred attribute of that deity I just named, Ishtar, the Babylonian goddess of love, fertility, and war. Ishtar was a force to be reckoned with, representing both benevolence and destruction. She was often depicted riding fiercely into battle on a chariot drawn by roaring lions. But Ishtar's lions weren't just for riding into the battle. The Babylonians believed that these majestic creatures were the architectural guardians themselves. So imagine walking up to the famous Ishtar Gate, one of the 8 fortified entrances to the inner city of Babylon, built during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar II. As you approach this massive structure towering above the city, you're greeted by striking, bright blue glazed brick reliefs. And along those walls of the Ishtar Gate and the processional way, there are more than 120 striding lions that are perfectly molded. These lions weren't just decorative, they were physical and spiritual protectors, placed outward to ward off demons, evil spirits, and enemies of the state. Walking through the gate and heading toward the northern palace, you'd come face to face with the celebrated Lion of Babylon. This awe-inspiring 12-ton black basalt statue is one of the very few surviving monumental stone artifacts actually still remaining in Iraq today. It depicts a powerful striding lion triumphantly trampling a reclining human figure, and this was carved around 600 BCE, and this sculpture isn't just about raw power. Archaeologists have even found saddle-like marks on the lion's back, and this suggests to them that it was originally designed to carry a seated figure of the goddess Ishtar herself. So whether they were painted in the lapis lazuli blue on a city gate or carved from dark volcanic rock, the lions of Babylon carried a heavy cuneiform inscribed weight. They were the protectors of the sacred way, the physical embodiment of a war goddess, and the perfect metaphor for a king who had successfully harnessed the forces of chaos to bring order to his civilization. So that was the Babylonians and how they revered lions. Next, we are going to talk about the Chinese Empire. And you guys can only guess what the animal is that is associated with the Chinese Empire. Of course, it's the panda. Now, looking at the art and the game of Spirited at the panda, it's casted as a Chinese warrior with shielded armor and 2 swords. And it gives that look that if it doesn't cut you up beforehand, it might actually cuddle you. So you don't know which one it's going to be. Today we are going to be talking about a global superstar, and you guys know this if you spent any time on the internet. A creature so universally beloved that if you don't like pandas, you're probably just jealous you don't get to lay around, nap, and eat snacks all day. That's the only thing I can assume if you don't like pandas. Now, when you think of a panda, you probably picture a fluffy, bamboo-munching cotton ball rolling down a hill. They are truly the apex predators of stealing our attention. But they are so much more than that, than just viral video content, especially to the Chinese Empire. In China, the panda is officially designated as Guaobao, and I probably mispronounced that, which this translates to national heirloom or national treasure. And honestly, I think pandas have earned this title. Their entire existence is woven right into the fabric of Chinese culture, philosophy, and its history. Even their iconic look is deeply philosophical to the Chinese. For centuries, that striking black and white coat has been tied to the concept of yin and yang, which I didn't know that before researching this, but I found it pretty interesting. So yeah, they're tied to yin and yang, which is known as the perfect balance of opposing forces, harmony, and peace. They are quite literally walking, breathing symbols of harmony to the Chinese culture. Granted, a lot of the daily harmony is just them sleeping and eating 30 pounds of bamboo, but I mean, you can't really disrespect the hustle there. Historically, though, they weren't just seen as peaceful, they were also prized symbols of strength and prosperity. During the Han and Tang dynasties, emperors kept giant pandas and royal menageries as ultimate status symbols. And if you want more information on menageries and how empires kept animals specifically as trophies and essentially status symbols, you can go back and check out my episode on Art Nova, where we talk about zoos and the history of menageries and all that. So, yeah, just a quick plug for that one. But they also had a surprisingly practical use on the battlefield. Now, before we get too far, don't think that they're actually riding into battle strapped on top of these pandas, which I think would be pretty cool, but they were actually symbols for battle. During wartime, if a faction raised a banner featuring a panda pattern, it signaled an immediate desire to negotiate a truce. So essentially the panda was a living white flag to the Chinese Empire. And the message was pretty simple, is like, hey, let's call the battle, let's chill, and let's just chill out and be more like pandas. That's pretty much what it meant. And that historical role actually ties perfectly into what we call panda diplomacy, which today China's modern use of pandas as soft power tools. And no, we're not plugging 12-volt batteries into pandas' ass here. They were tools of power, not power tools. So hopefully you guys understand my terminology there. While we tend to think of it as a modern political strategy, it actually has incredible deep roots into this society. The earliest record we have goes all the way back to the 7th century during the Tang dynasty. Empress Wu Zixin actually gifted a pair of pandas to Japan's imperial court. So China has been deploying these signs of negotiation for over thousands of years. But because pandas are so scarce and exclusively native to the mountain ranges of southwest China, they remain an irreplaceable, unique facet of the nation's heritage. They're not just mascots, they are living, breathing connections to China's ancient past. From imperial war stoppers to global diplomats, all while maintaining a strict diet of plants and naps, I think, honestly, all of us should probably aspire to be a little bit more like the panda. But we're going to go on the opposite end of the spectrum, and we're going to talk about an animal that is regarded a little more fiercely than a panda, and that is the crocodile of ancient Egypt. Now, the art of the crocodile in this game shows a pharaoh-like croc showing his snarling teeth and holding a sword and a khopesh, which a khopesh is a lot like a sword, but with a curved blade to it. And then in the background, you can see obviously the Great Pyramids of Giza. But why did the designers choose this as the character for Egypt and for the Egyptians? Obviously, I think these predators played a major role in Egyptian history just because of the importance of the Nile River, where these crocodiles hunted. But they also had a deep relationship with the Egyptians that struck terror and deep reverence into the hearts of these ancient people. To the people of the Nile, the crocodile was essentially a living contradiction to them. On one hand, it was the ultimate predator, and it was a terrifying beast that threatened everyday life, the livelihood of fishermen, and even the souls navigating the underworld. But on the other hand, it was inextricably linked to creation, fertility, and the very lifeblood of their civilization. So there was a duality to this, and that is exactly why it captured their imagination so completely. They saw the crocodile as the ultimate encapsulation of the natural world, both the creator of chaos and the provider of life. And at the center of this duality was the crocodile-headed god, Sobek. The cult of Sobek was one of the earliest and most enduring in Egyptians' history. Known as the Lord of the Nile, Sobek was the embodiment of the annual flooding of the river, and he provided the essential nutrient-rich silt that allowed crops to grow in the desert, which obviously was so important to the Egyptian empire. Because of this, the Egyptians took their worship to an unbelievable level with this god. In many temples, priests maintained pools specifically for live crocodiles, and these weren't just animals to them. They were treated pretty much as sacred, pampered, living incarnations of the god Sobek himself. And to me, it's kind of wild to think about ancient priests pampering crocodiles, wild predators, but I don't know. That's just me. The Egyptians actually scaled this up into a massive commercial industry of breeding and, you guessed it, mummification. Especially during the Greco-Roman period, the demand for these sacred offerings skyrocketed. Alright, so now we're going to the Fayum Oasis, particularly at the town of Normalthus. Archaeologists have uncovered massive ancient crocodile hatcheries and nurseries. Thousands and thousands of mummified crocodiles have been found here, and essentially worshippers would purchase these mummies as votive offerings to the god Sobek, and then leave them at the temples to ask for blessings, agricultural success, and protection, pretty much. But the crocodile's symbolic power wasn't just limited to the gods and agriculture. The pharaohs themselves adopted the creature as an emblem of their military might, agility, and absolute power. So these pharaohs, the kings, would frequently align themselves with Sobek to demonstrate their ability to maintain cosmic order over the unpredictable forces of nature. They even adopted the god directly into their royal names. like the famous 12th century dynasty kings, and I'm going to butcher these, is Sobek Hotep or Amenemhat Sobek, by linking their royal identity to the fearsome crocodile. Rulers were essentially telling their people, I have the raw, untamable power of the Nile on my side. So, from a terrifying predator to a revered deity, the crocodile was truly the heartbeat of ancient Egypt. And now you can see why they chose to represent this specific empire by a crocodile in this game. Up next, we are going to talk about the Greek Empire. And like I said before, it's represented by owls. Alright, so getting into the Greeks and their associated animal, the owl, and how they revered these animals. So let's start off by looking at the card art. So we are looking at like a hoplite figure, and he's holding a sharp spear. So what you would imagine ancient Greek warrior would look like. And he's kind of looking to the side, and one could only imagine if he's asking itself, who's next? Today we associate the owl with different things like libraries, graduation caps, and either like old-fashioned wisdom, or if you're a millennial like me, you may see them as represented by the Tootsie Pop commercial, where it's asking you how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop. Anyways, that's besides the point. The ancient Greeks didn't see it this way. They weren't just smart and a cause for childhood obesity to the ancient Greeks. They were a political powerhouse. They were a military savior and the physical shadow of a goddess. Now, if we rewind the clock a little bit to the earliest days of Greek society, people didn't actually look at owls with too much of reverence. In fact, it is quite the opposite of that. Early Greeks associated these nocturnal predators with death, funeral rituals, and even fear. And it kind of makes sense. If you're walking through a pitch black forest thousands of years ago, and you hear that piercing ghostly screech, you're not thinking, oh, how wise, You're probably a little unsettled and thinking about the underworld itself, if you've ever heard the screech of an owl, that I have actually heard. But as Greece moved into classical and Hellenistic periods, a massive cultural shift occurred regarding owls. Went through a whole rebranding process. It transformed into a creature of nightmares, into a revered emblem of justice, divinity, and knowledge. And that transformation is largely thanks to a specific deity that they worshipped, Athena. You've probably heard this name before if you're into Greek mythology, that kind of thing. And Athena, she was the goddess of wisdom and military strategy. And who was her sacred companion? A specific species known as the Athene noctua, or also known as little owl. The Greeks noticed something brilliant about the owl's biology. It could see perfectly in the dark. To them, this wasn't just a physical trait, it was a spiritual one. And the owl represented foresight, the ability to see the truth when it's hidden in the shadows. So, there's actually a pretty cool legend about this regarding Athena. So it was said that the little owl would sit on Athena's blind side, and apparently a god had a blind side, but that's besides the point here. But this owl would perch upon Athena's shoulders and would essentially comprehend the whole truth for her, since she had that blind side, and it gave her the ultimate clarity. And because Athena was also the goddess of warfare and tactics, this bird quickly became a major military asset in the Greek Empire. So imagine you're a Greek hoplite soldier standing in formation, sweating beneath your bronze armor, terrified of the battle ahead, and suddenly a shadow sweeps over the ranks. You look up and it's an owl soaring across the sky. To the soldiers here, this wasn't just like a random bird looking for a mouse. it was a powerful omen to them, an omen of victory. It meant Athena herself was on the battlefield watching over their tactics and offering divine favor. A single owl sighting could instantly turn the tide of morale for them. But the owl's influence didn't stop on the battlefield, it dominated their economy also. The city-state of Athens adopted the owl as its defining emblem. If you walked into any market across the Mediterranean during the height of the Greek power, you would see the silver Athenian, this coin. It was called a tetradrachm, which I know I'm mispronouncing. This coin was the reserve currency of its day, and stamped right on the reverse side of it was the iconic image of the owl. So if you had to flip a coin during this time frame, it wasn't heads or tails, it was Athena on one side or owl. So by placing their owl on their money, Athens wasn't just making pretty coinage, they were protecting their intellectual and commercial dominance, and projecting that across the known world. Every time a foreign merchant traded with an owl coin, they were reminded of Athenian power. So the next time you see a cartoon owl wearing a mortarboard hat on a textbook, remember that its history is actually painted in bronze armor, ancient silver, and the shadows of Athens. It's a symbol that traveled from the depths of superstitious fear straight to the heights of human philosophy. So now that you know about Athena and the owls of ancient Greece, let's talk about the infamous Shiba Inu of ancient Japan. Now, I know all of you have seen these dogs, the Shiba, but I guarantee it, if it doesn't ring a bell for you, you won't regret Googling a picture. Take a moment and just Google a picture of this dog, and you'll quickly know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, we're going to get into the Japanese Empire and the Shiba Inu, which I'm just going to call Shiba. It's a type of dog, and this dog in this game is represented as a samurai, and he's holding a sword. This dog is a cultural icon to the Japanese empire itself. So if you've spent any time on the internet, you probably have grown to love these dogs, and you've seen their expressive, kind of slightly judgmental fox-like faces. At least that's what they remind me of. But long before this time, where they've become the kings of internet memes here, these dogs were deeply woven into the very fabric of Japanese history and the samurai warrior class. And through this story, you guys are going to quickly learn that these guys are essentially living, breathing symbols of resilience. So let's get into their story. So to really understand the Shiba, we're going to have to go way, way back into ancient times, even prehistoric times. Ancestors of the Shiba have been traced all the way back to 7000 BC, actually, during Japan's Jomon period. And this makes them what biologists call a basal breed. And what this means is they are genetically one of the closest living relatives to ancient wolves, which I thought was pretty fascinating. Now let's fast forward to around the 10th century and kind of imagine the rugged mist-covered mountains of feudal Japan. And obviously you see navigating this harsh terrain is the samurai warrior. And right by their side, they had these sturdy, incredibly agile little dogs, the Shiba. The samurais used the Shiba to hunt everything from birds and small game, all the way up to large wild boars, and they were prized for their quick reflexes, intense focus, and absolute fearlessness. So when you look at a Shiba's confident posture today, you're pretty much literally looking at the spirit of a samurai's hunting partner. As the centuries rolled on, though, Japan's appreciation for its native dogs only grew. As early as the 7th century, the Yamato court actually established an official dog keeper's office. They essentially treated these native breeds like cultural royalty to them. But the story of the Shiba took a dark turn during the 20th century, so we're speeding up the time a little bit. In the early 20th century, Western breeds actually started being imported into Japan, and suddenly crossbreeding became the trend, and the pure Shiba Inu lineage itself was on the verge of vanishing entirely. But thankfully, in 1928, a group of dedicated fanciers took action, and they formed an association called NIPPO, NIPPO. And what this was, it was an association for the preservation of the Japanese dog itself. And they fought really hard to protect this breed, and their efforts actually paid off pretty big. Because in 1936, the Shiba was officially designated a national natural monument of Japan, which helped reinstate the importance of saving this species itself. They weren't just recognized as pets, but they were essentially a living piece of the country's heritage. But just as the Shiba was getting to be safe on paper, World War II kicked off, and unfortunately they entered another dark history. The wartime years were pretty devastating to these dogs because of the bombing raids and the destroying of their habitat and the extreme food shortages in Japan meant people couldn't feed their dogs, and a massive outbreak of canine distemper swept through the remaining population after the war. And this dog actually almost became extinct. It was on the absolute brink of extinction. But here we go to a positive side of the story. There was a miracle revival that happened. So dedicated breeders scoured the country and managed to rescue the bloodlines of just 3 surviving regional strains. And these were the Shinshu Shiba and the Mino Shiba and the San-in Shiba. So pretty much every single Shiba alive today traces its roots back to those few survivors. So earlier I said this is a story of resilience. That's what I'm talking about. These dogs went through some hard times, and they were able to recover thanks to these breeders and come back. So fortunately, the story didn't end with the wreckage of that war. And in the 1950s, even more, the military families stationed in Japan absolutely fell in love with these animals and these dogs, and eventually brought them over to the United States. And so from there, the secret was out, how great these dogs were, and the American Kennel Club officially recognized them in 1992. And today, obviously, they're a global phenomenon. And partly because of this is because their kind of cat-like independence and their fierce loyalty and that unmistakable, proud spirit to them. So they went from hunting in prehistoric mountains to walking alongside samurais to surviving a world war to now sitting comfortably on our couches. So most importantly, though, they were saved for internet memes. And that was supposed to be a joke. Highly sarcastic there. But anyways, the internet memes are good. So we've talked about a story of resilience, and we are going to start talking about a different part of history, the Norse side, and we're going to talk about an animal called the raven. And this is not about the book, this is about the animal specifically. We're not a literature podcast here. Obviously, we're a board game podcast, but even more, we like to dive into the history. So let's get into the Norse and Raven faction of the game Spirited. Alright, so up next, looking at the card art for this specific faction, We have a shadowy figure of a raven holding a Viking axe, and they are depicting the Norse faction in this game. Now, to us modern people, we may see the raven just as kind of like a spooky bird or a prop for a horror movie or simply just a scavenger. But the Norse themselves, they saw this bird totally different. To the Norse people, it was a guide, a warrior's totem, and essentially the literal eyes of a god. So to truly understand why the Vikings themselves revered this bird, we are going to have to start at the very top of the cosmos and their deity Odin. Because right on the shoulders of the Allfather himself, Odin, there was a raven. And Odin wasn't just a god who sat on a throne looking imposing. He was obsessed with knowledge and consumed by a relentless quest to know everything about the 9 realms. And he didn't do it alone. He had ravens. He had the help of Hugin and Munin, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing those also, but their names literally translate to thought and memory. So every single morning, as the sun cracked over their horizon, Odin would release these 2 birds into the sky. And they would fly across the cosmos, spying for him, listening for Odin, and just observing for him. So by dinner, they'd return, landing right back on Odin's shoulder, and they would whisper these secrets back to him into his ears. So essentially, they were a distant scent to Odin, his eyes and ears of the cosmos. So it's kind of a beautiful or poetic image, but it also kind of shows that the Norse recognized something within these birds, and we can actually prove that with science nowadays, that these ravens are terrifyingly smart birds. They're absolutely really smart. So you may have seen they're able to craft tools and use tools. And yeah, they're one of the smarter birds out there. But back to Odin, to him, they represented kind of the mind's ability to wander, to seek, and to remember things. The raven's spiritual connection didn't stop in the halls of the gods, though. They extended right into the bloody battlefields that the Vikings were in. So ravens, they're considered to be called carrion birds, and essentially they are scavengers. So wherever there was a battle, there was a feast, obviously with all the dead bodies. And because these ravens were the first to arrive on the scene after a clash of shields, the Norse didn't just see them as like pests, they saw them as holy messengers. And they were the bridge between the living and the dead, flying alongside the Valkyries to escort the souls of those fallen warriors straight to Valhalla itself. So to the Norsemen, to have a raven circle over you in battle, it wasn't a curse, it was a sign that the gods were watching you. And that brings us to how the Vikings used this symbol to essentially wage psychological warfare. They took this divine connection and embroidered it right onto their war flags, creating the legendary Raven banner. So think of it as a physical totem of Odin's favor. We actually have historical texts that document this, like the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. It described these banners in action. But also, according to lore, the raven on the flag wasn't just like a static drawing, it was a sign. If the Vikings were about to win a battle, the flapping raven would appear with its wings flapping and soaring with life. But if defeat was looming, it would droop and hang lifelessly. This was kind of the sign to them. So, like I just said, it was kind of a brilliant piece of psychological warfare to them and their enemies. So imagine being one of these Anglo-Saxon soldiers looking across the field and then seeing this raven banner of a conqueror like Harold Hardrada flapping in the wind. To them, it didn't just mean like the Vikings were coming, it meant that Odin had already decided who is going to die that day. This bird and this raven banner itself was a very important tool. But let's get grounded here for a minute. Let's go down here. They weren't just like mystics dreaming of gods and banners. They were also practical, hardened survivalists helping the Norse. They were, like I just said, they could create tools, and these ravens were a tool to the Norse. When Vikings explored and pushed into the Atlantic, they didn't have obviously compasses or GPS, but they brought with them cages of ravens with them. So the reason why they brought these ravens with them on their longships is because they knew ravens were land birds and they hate water. So if a long ship got turned around in a dense fog, the captain would release one of these ravens, and if the bird flew up and circled back to the ship, the crew knew that there was nothing but open ocean for miles. But if that raven took off in a straight line into the mist, the captain would tell the oarsmen to follow the bird because they knew it was heading straight for solid land. So even back on land, Norse hunters used them as natural spotters also, because ravens notoriously shadow large predators. So because they're waiting for them to make a kill so they can sweep in for the scraps. So by watching the sky for circling ravens, a Norse hunter could easily track down game or steer clear of any dangerous predators, for instance. So when you're looking back at the Norse world, the raven occupies this kind of incredible, unique space in all these different facets of their lives. It was high up in the heavens for the intellect of Odin. It was flapping on the battlefield as a harbinger of victory for these guys, and caged on a longship saving lives in the middle of a storm. They saw the raven for exactly what it was. They're intelligent, adaptable, and fiercely resilient also. So obviously this is a similar reflection of the Viking spirit themselves, so I could see that similarities in there. So next time you see a raven perched on a telephone wire or circling a park, take a second look. You just might be looking at a piece of ancient history staring right back at you. Unless this raven's holding an axe, though, that's something different. I would not follow this raven if it's holding an axe and staring at you. I would probably turn around and leave. But yeah, thinking of the Vikings and the raven, obviously these were some tough birds and tough warriors. But we're going to roll into another tough ancient civilization and a tough animal, actually, and that is the jaguar of the Mexican jungle. Okay, getting into the Olmec and the jaguars. So the Olmec was an ancient empire from Mesoamerica also. Looking at the art on this card in this game, you have a depiction of a jaguar, and he's kind of like traversing through a jungle, looking like he's looking for prey, and he's wearing Mesoamerican clothes, that kind of thing. And these guys were in the jungles of ancient Mesoamerica, like I just said, between the time frame of 1200 and 400 BCE, so an ancient civilization. So imagine kind of a civilization that didn't just, they built pretty much the blueprint for the Maya and the Aztecs who were to come later in history. But they did so while like creating some of the most like haunting and enigmatic art that the world has ever seen. And you'll see this through the game also on their wonders. They had these things called colossal heads, which are kind of unnerving. They're often called the Olmec Empire, the mother culture of Mesoamerica. But we're not just going to talk about their massive architecture today. We're going to dive deep into their obsession with their symbol of absolute power, which was the jaguar. Now, if you're a ruler looking to legitimize your crown in the ancient world, you probably don't want to pick a harmless mascot. You probably want something a little more tough And here we go again. Another tough animal is the jaguar. They didn't just admire this animal, the Olmecs, they integrated it into their everyday lives, kind of into their DNA, or essentially their spiritual DNA specifically. Not literally, obviously, but kind of woven into their culture in every facet. So let's break down exactly why this big cat ruled the Olmec imagination. Number one, this cat signified divine lineage to them. The Olmec ruling elite didn't just claim to have a mandate from heaven, they claimed they were the direct descendants of the jaguar. So if you're talking about a power move, that was probably one of the big power moves from this civilization. Essentially your great-great-grandfather is saying that he's a jungle predator and nobody's going to ask him any questions or all that good stuff. They also represented shamanic transformation. To the Olmecs, the world wasn't just what you could see. Shamans and rulers were believed to possess the terrifying supernatural ability to shapeshift, traversing the boundary between the mortal realm and the underworld. Also, jaguars are nocturnal animals, and they're stealthy, and they're incredibly lethal in the dark. They kind of became these ultimate symbols to the Olmec people, specifically representing like the night and the earth, and just like the mysteriousness of an underworld itself. And they became quickly like fixated on these animals and created these giant statues, essentially statue heads, and they're like similar to what they would call a were-jaguar, kind of like a werewolf, so a human jaguar hybrid, and they're kind of like striking, airy human hybrids carved into jade and stone. So if you're looking at pictures of these, you'll see kind of some very distinct, unmistakable features on these. You'll see an obvious like cleft or split head to it, very narrow, like almond-shaped eyes, and a heavy downturned feline mouth to it, and they're like snarling, very, very odd. And historians are still debating on what these colossal heads actually represent, because they're constantly apparently still debating what they mean. So some anthropologists argue that it represents like a primary fertility deity, and then others are sticking to the shamanic transformation theory. And then there's a fascinating alternative theory out there, apparently. Some scholars wonder if these facial features were actually inspired by ancient observations of congenital traits, which were interpreted by the Olmecs as divine or supernatural marks. But the Olmecs weren't just artists with like a cat fixation here, they were a massive foundational powerhouse too. So obviously these jaguars played an important role to this Olmec empire, because they made these massive statues that obviously were a hybrid of a jaguar and a human. When we look at later civilizations like the Maya or the Aztecs that kind of derived from this ancient Olmec empire, we're looking at societies that built upon this Olmec blueprint that they started. Considering things that they left behind, like the colossal heads and their traces of advanced knowledge in science and writing and trade, very similar to these follow-on empires that came. You've probably, like I said, you've seen pictures of these colossal heads. If you haven't, check them out. They're carved into these massive like basalt boulders into realistic human faces, and they're standing up to like 10 feet tall and weighing several tons. Because of these, each face has like a unique feature and distinct headgear. Historians believe that these aren't gods, but individual powerful Olmec rulers staring back at us across millennia. In addition, these massive monuments long Before Europe was writing about the Americas, the Olmecs were utilizing a highly complex calendar system and experimenting with early forms of hieroglyphic writing itself. And these Olmecs, they weren't just isolated in the jungle either. They had, through massive sprawling trade networks, the Olmecs exported their culture to others, and they traded things like jade, obsidian, and their agricultural methods along with other goods, and they exported their religion itself, actually. So because of this, that iconic jaguar imagery spread across the vast territories of ancient Mesoamerica. That's why this animal became so revered across that part of the world, and pretty much leaving a mark on every culture that followed the Olmecs. That was the Olmecs and their infatuation with the cats of the jungle. We're going to go across the ocean here, and we are going to talk about Persia and their infatuation with bulls. Now we are going to get into the Persian faction, which is depicted as a menacing bull who holds a shield and a sword and ready to defeat anything that comes its way. The Persian Empire, primarily the ancient Achaemenid Empire, which was 550 to 330 BCE, that was founded by Cyrus the Great and was one of the largest of its time. It stretched from Egypt and the Balkans to the Indus Valley. It pioneered administrative efficiency via satrapies, which are provinces, standard currency, and a 1,600-mile royal road. This Achaemenid Empire collapsed after being conquered by Alexander the Great in 330 BCE, but the region's geopolitical and cultural dominance continued under late major Persian dynasties like the Parthians and the Sassanians. So picture this: you're standing in the year 500 BCE, walking up to that monumental staircase into Persepolis, which was the heart of the Persian Empire. And as you reach the top of it, the first thing you encounter isn't a human guard. It's an absolute mountain of stone, a pair of massive, human-headed winged bulls, staring down at you with calm, terrifying authority. For the ancient Persians, the bull wasn't just livestock to them. They revered these animals just like all these other empires we are talking today. The bull to them, it was like a cosmic force, just like all these other deities. It represented strength of the King of Kings. It was the protection of the gods, and was like the literal abundance of the earth to these people. So we're going to start with just their architectural scale and their obsession with these animals. So if you were to walk into the Apadana, which was like a grand audience hall, and look up, you'd be staring at columns rising over 60 feet and in the ancient Persian Empire. And at the top of these columns, you would see massive double-headed bull sculptures acting as column capitals, cradling heavy wooden roof beams. And some of these bulls weighed up to 10 tons just by themselves. So if you were to happen to visit the Louvre Museum today, you can see one of these colossal capitals up close, and its scale is apparently mind-blowing if you visit there. It was engineering genius mixed with high-stakes political theater. The message was very clear to every visiting diplomat that the Persian Empire is unshakable and the very forces of nature support our kings. But the Persians didn't just use their bull for this muscle or to show these other empires how strong they were. The bull itself held a deep spiritual meaning in their religion, which was Zoroastrianism. It was their state religion, and Zoroastrian cosmology, which life itself began with a primordial bull. It was the source of all living creation. When its spirit was blessed, it brought the forth life and abundance to the earth. So when you saw a bull carved into a palace wall, you weren't just looking at decoration. It was like you were looking at a prayer for prosperity, a symbol of divine, and a symbol of creation. And much like all the other ancient empires we were talking to today, a lot of these saw metaphors as they looked out into the cosmos. So with this bull, they viewed the universe as kind of like a balance of opposing forces. And in their art, the bull represented the earth, the winter, and the moon. And then it had its ultimate rival, which was the lion, which the lion symbolized the sun and the summer and like fiery heat to them. So they had a lot of these, the lion and the bull together in a lot of their art and statues. So if you ever look at photos of like the ruins of Persepolis, you will see one image carved over and over again, and it was a fierce lion attacking a bull. At first glance, it looks like a violent hunt scene, but to the Persians themselves, it was a symbol of celebration to them. It was the ultimate symbol of the Persian New Year, which is pronounced Nowruz, I believe. Nowruz. The lion consuming the bull represented summer, conquering winter, the triumph of spring, and the eternal cycle of renewal. So the bull and the lion were kind of opposing forces, and the lion taking over the bull, that kind of thing. But perhaps like the most stunning example of this mastery stands at the gate of all the nations. So as travelers from all over the known world entered the palace complex, they passed through this massive guardians known as Lamassu. And these were human-headed winged bulls. We talked about a little bit earlier, and there was some symbolism here. If you had like a raw divine physical power of the bull, the soaring freedom of and perspective of the eagle wings, and the intellect, wisdom, and consciousness of a human face, that was the symbol of these statues. So the ultimate harmony of mind, muscle, and spirit was standing guard over their empire. That's what these kind of statues represented to them, and these deities and the cultural icons of the bulls. So next time you look at ancient Persian art, don't just see stone, you see what they saw in a bull, which was their cosmic calendar, their myth of creation, and the like absolute grandeur of their empire that was carved into their worldview and into the like very pillars of their creations and their monuments. So that was the Persian bull. We are going to start talking about the Romans. And the Romans didn't have a thing with bulls, they had a thing with wolves. So let's get into the Romans and the wolf. Looking at the art on the cards for the Roman Empire, you'll be staring straight into the eyes of a Roman wolf. It's looking straight at you, and it's shielded and armed and ready for battle, as you might think. So this is a Roman warrior. Now, when you think of Rome, you probably picture sprawling marble columns, disciplined legions, marching in perfect formation, or Emperor Augustus ruling over a territory that stretched all the way from the rainy hills of Britain to the deserts of the Middle East. You kind of think of law, engineering, and roads. But if you strip all that stuff away, the marble, the true heart of Rome, wasn't just built on this bureaucracy and engineering. It was born in a much deeper root, more of a wild root. We're talking about Roman's quintessential founding, so how Roman was founded, and it's from the story of the wolf. So long before this empire split in 395 AD, and long before the western half collapsed in 476 AD, we're going to go way back to the very beginning of Rome itself, and it is the myth of the birth of their nation. So according to Roman legend, the twin brothers of Romulus and Remus were abandoned as infants and left to die. But the river god Tiberinus guided their basket safely to the shores of the Palatine Hill. And they should have starved or been eaten. Instead, they were found by a she-wolf, which is known as Lupa. The she-wolf Lupa, she didn't tear these twins apart like you might expect from being a wolf. She actually nursed them and saved them. And this connection gave the wolf an immense cultural and religious significance to the Roman people, because this is the myth, the story of how Rome was built. To them, the wolf represented survival, raw martial strength, and an independent spirit. The sacred cave where this supposedly happened, this myth, was called Lupercal, and it became one of the most revered sites in their city. But then we get into, obviously, history has twists to it. In ancient Latin, the word lupa didn't just mean a female wolf, it was also a slang for a prostitute. So some historians are looking at this and kind of see a social nuance to this, because Rome has been historically known as kind of rough and kind of gritty and had gritty beginnings. So it wasn't really born in luxury like we may see in the later empires of Rome. It was more forged into a rough empire. So that's kind of where they're getting at with this association with the word lupa and the female wolf. So as those twins grew, so did the connection to the wild. Wolves were deeply tied to also the god Mars, which is the god of war, who also said to be the mythological father of Romulus and Remus. And for Roman, the wolf embodied the exact traits you need to survive: courage, ferocity, and martial vigor. And this wasn't just a story they told around campfires. They wore this into battle. This was their this is the story that they kept with them for ages and ages and held deep regard for it. During the early Roman Republic, the military embraced this symbolism completely. And if you were what they called a V-light, one of the light skirmishers running out ahead of the main army, or a standard bearer carrying the legion's pride, you didn't just wear a helmet, you wore actually a wolf pelt. So imagine looking across a battlefield and seeing the front lines of the enemy covered in the heads and shoulders of wolves. So pretty much they were sending a message saying, hey, we are the predators and you guys are the prey. And then even their religion was soaked in this feral energy. So every mid-February, they celebrated what they called Lupercalia. It's a chaotic ancient pastoral festival meant to purify the city and promote fertility. The name itself comes from that god Lupus, or Lupa, which is the Latin word for wolf. And it was a wild, bloody affair that reminded this sophisticated empire of its savage roots. So if you look for a visual representation of this today, your mind immediately goes to one specific image, and that is the Capitoline wolf, which is often depicted in Roman architecture. It's that famous bronze sculpture of a fierce, tense she-wolf standing protectively over two nursing human toddlers, if you've seen this statue before. And for centuries, everyone believed this was an ancient masterpiece, and it was traditionally attributed to the Etruscans in the 5th century BCE, with the twins being added later into the 15th century. But there's actually a twist to the story, because due to recent radiocarbon dating, it pretty much shattered that timeline that they originally thought. And it turns out the bronze wolf wasn't cast in the ancient world at all. It was actually created in the Middle Ages, somewhere between 1021 and 1153 CE. So obviously this story held its roots in Rome and Italy all the way up into the 1000s here. So even though the statue itself is younger than we thought, the power of the image remains pretty much completely untouched even today. Because if you go to Rome today and the wolf is pretty much still everywhere. It's on public monuments. It's on the city services, and if you're a sports fan, it's a crest to the Roman football club. And the wolf is woven into essentially the very identity of the people themselves. So, out in the forests of Italy, the Italian wolf, which is known as Canis lupus italicus, it still roams there today, and it's a vital piece of that country's wildlife conservation. So to wrap this all up regarding Rome, Rome started with a wolf. It conquered the world and the spirit of the wolf, and thousands of years later, the wolf is still essentially running in that area of the world and their culture. So let's go over to Africa and the savannah, and we are going to look at the hyena and the Sao Empire. Alright, let's get into the Sao faction, which is depicted as a spotted hyena holding a spear, prowling the Africa savanna, hunting for its next prey. Now we're taking a journey into Central Africa here, traveling back through time to a place where history and mythology kind of blurred together, kind of like a mirage over a desert lake. We're exploring two completely different but yet equally fascinating forces that shape the heart of the continent. An ancient society that were legendary artisans, and also the animal whose very laugh carries the weight of 1,000 myths to this society. And this is the story of the Sao civilization and the enduring legacy of the spotted hyena and these cultures and their cultures around this time. So we're going to start our journey on the banks of the Chari River, which is just south of Lake Chad in Africa. If you were to stand there between the 6th century BCE and the 16th century CE, you would find yourself in the heart of what we call the Sao civilization, SAO. Now, if you ask the modern Kitoko people there, who are the direct descendants of the Sao, they won't just tell you about an old empire. They're going to tell you about what they think as giants, because local oral histories describe the Sao as a race of literal giants and individuals of immense stature and strength who could bend trees and clear forests with just their bare hands. But while the myth speaks of physical giants, archaeology is telling us that they were actual intellectual and artistic giants. The Sao didn't leave behind a centralized empire with a single king. Instead, they built highly sophisticated networks of independent, which are patrilineal city-states across Africa. And to date, archaeologists have uncovered more than 350 different sites, many of which were large, impressively fortified settlements. And inside these cities they found a level of craftsmanship that still leaves modern historians breathless and amazed. The Sao were brilliant metal workers also. They mastered the complex lost wax casting technique, which is churning out intricate copper alloys and bronze sculptures. But perhaps their most famous legacy, though, is their terracotta statues, which are highly detailed, expressive ceramic figures that give us a literal face-to-face look at their civilization that thrived for over 2,000 years. Between the 14th and 6th centuries, the expanding Kanem-Bornu Empire began to absorb the region, bringing it with a wave of Islamization. the spreading of Islam, and gradually the distinct Sao culture dissolved, leaving behind their incredible artifacts and their fortified cities, and the whispered legends of giants who built them, and all the other legends they built around hyenas also. But as the Sao built their cities under the sun, some other powers ruled the African savanna. But as these powers kind of grew and spread across Africa, the myth and the stories of the African hyena kind of stayed within these cultures and their folklore, and kind of like their human psyche, these spotted hyenas. So if we're talking about African mythology, you're going to encounter many instances of the spotted hyena. Biologically, we know the spotted hyena is a keystone scavenger and predator. They're kind of like a cleanup crew for the savanna, and they regulate herbivore populations and prevent the spread of disease by consuming the entire carcasses of animals. And they are vital for the health of their ecosystem there. But culturally, humans have long viewed them as kind of like a lens of mystique and fear. So another culture around this was the San mythology, S-A-N. And to them, the hyena is like a multifaceted trickster force, a living representation of the balance between creation and destruction. And then you have cultures like the Samburu, which hyenas' behaviors of digging deep burrows and is seen as like a physical and spiritual link between our living world and the realm of their ancestors. So these hyenas were seen as like spiritual messengers. So, but to go to other regions of the continent, that mystique kind of turns into more of a warning sign. Countless folk tales caution against the hyena's association with nocturnal magic, and there are actual legends of hyenas, similar to what we saw with the jaguars earlier, and these are called Buddhas, and these are humans who shift shape into hyenas by night, or sorcerers who ride them through the dark to cast curses, and yet right alongside the fear is their respect for the hyena. So in Namibia, some Ashawambu clans proudly adopted the spotted hyena as their official totem. For them, the hyena doesn't really represent witchcraft. It represents more of a family origins and incredible stamina and deeply coordinated community cooperation. So when you look at all this together, the Sao and the hyena and all the different, essentially those cultures during that time and area, you see kind of two sides that are connected throughout history. On one hand, we have tangible physical remnants of like human brilliance with their bronze and their clay and their fortified walls. But on the other side, we have like intangible living mythology of the savannah and running wild in the shape of a hyena, and these spiritual messengers. Both are giants in their own right, speaking of giants, and they kind of both remind us of the deep, complex roots of Central African heritage, which obviously I'm not an expert in, but that's how the hyena and the Sao civilization are kind of tied together. It's deeply rooted into many African cultures and mythologies. So yeah, that was the Sao civilization, and now we are going to take a look at the last civilization in this game. Thanks for pushing through here. We're going to touch on the Scythians and the eagle. So last but not least, here we have made it to the Scythian faction, and they are depicted as a fierce eagle holding a bow and arrow, and they're pretty much ready to kill anything coming its way. So picture a landscape that stretches as far as the eye can see. There are no cities, there's no borders, pretty much just an endless ocean of grass under a massive, unrelenting sky. This is the Eurasian steppe thousands of years ago. And across this terrain, the ground is shaking under the hooves of the ancient world's most feared nomadic warriors. These are the Scythians. They were master horsemen, legendary archers, and a formidable confederation that held the ancient world in awe. But if you wanted to truly understand what drove the Scythian soul, you didn't look down at the dirt under these hooves, you looked up. You looked up at a predator of the sky, which is the eagle. And to the Scythians, the eagle wasn't just a bird, it was a cosmic powerhouse, just like all these others. It's a spiritual of the divine, an image of divinity to them, of the cosmos. It symbolized the divine power of the sun, immortality, and essentially absolute military supremacy. So if you were a warlord or part of the warrior aristocracy, the eagle was essentially your ultimate status symbol. This status symbol, it told the world that your power was backed by the heavens themselves. And we know this because the Scythians, they left behind an incredible visual record for us. They didn't build stone monuments, they were master goldsmiths. Archaeologists call their aesthetic the animal style motif. And when you look at Scythian gold, you aren't just seeing like realistic textbook drawings of birds, you're seeing highly hyper exaggerated stylized masterpieces of birds. And they focused heavily on the eagle's lethality, giving them like massive, deeply hooked beaks and razor sharp talons. It's aggressive, it's like beautiful art, and it was meant to like project pure, unadulterated power to them. The connection, though, it went a little bit deeper than that. Also, it was a spiritual image to them. Also, the Scythians practiced shamanism, much like some of these other cultures we've talked about today. And to them, the eagle was a living bridge. Think about it. A bird that can soar so high it vanishes into the blue and is the perfect messenger between terrestrial mankind and their celestial realms. And even during religious ceremonies and libation rituals, the eagle represented this link to the divine. It was the ultimate intermediary between the earthly, like nomadic chiefs, and the gods of the sun and the sky. And speaking of those chiefs there, the eagle was like the ultimate mirror of the Scythian warrior. It represented fearlessness and prestige, and to wear the eagle was to essentially claim its traits to them. But a Scythian warrior was nothing without their horse also. Their horses were their lifelines and their partners in battle, and even their wealth. So naturally, the Scythians extended this sky power to their steeds themselves. They decorated their prized horses in elaborate eagle iconography, and archaeologists have even found like gilded wooden and leather plaques of eagles that were meant to be attached to saddles and bridles and chest straps. So imagine a horde of thousands of horses galloping at you, glinting in the sun, entirely draped in the imagery of predatory birds. It must have looked like the sky itself was descending on the battlefield. But the Scythians' imagination didn't just stop with the real world. They took the majesty of the eagle and fused it with the terrestrial king of beasts to embrace a mythic hybrid, and that is what we call the griffin. And this griffin, it has the body of a lion and the head and wings of an eagle. The griffin combines supreme earthly power with celestial majesty. In Scythian culture, these mythical figures were the ultimate symbols of royalty and the sun, guardians of gold, and keepers of divine right. So, the next time you picture the ancient nomads of the steppe, don't just think of wild raiders out there. Think of a culture deeply attuned to the cosmos, projecting the power through the wings of an eagle, ruling the earth while keeping their eyes fixed firmly on the sky. All right, so I know that was a lot of information here on these clans, but I hope you found it as interesting as I did when I was researching for this episode. Like I said, you can see some similarities in these cultures, which I think is very fascinating. We can see that these animals played a huge role in ancient civilizations and embodied the spirits of their people. Now I can see why the designers of this game have chosen to call the game Spirited, and enlisted the fantastic artists who created the presentation to bring these to this world and to life. Obviously, these animals played a huge role in these ancient civilizations, and that's why they chose to use these animals to represent them. So yeah, that was the history of all these animals. Next, we're going to learn how to play the game, which is going to take a lot shorter time than the history itself did. The game is not very heavy rules-wise, so it shouldn't take too long to get into the rules. Give you guys an understanding of how the game plays, and then we're going to wrap things up like we always do with our mechanical integration and how that integrates with the theme, and put this on a thematic scale. So, in the time being, so go enlist some help from your personal spirit animal, if you may will, and let's jump into this rulebook and get you guys going on playing this game. From the halls of history comes a familiar tale of brave warriors fighting to leave their mark. With allegiances on the line, will you rise as one worthy to be followed? Forge great armies in your camps, construct wonders, and keep a watchful eye on the road ahead. Will you reign as the most spirited champion of the ancient world? The aim of Spirited is to be the player with the most spirit after the final battle. Players gain spirit through marching with clans to forge allegiances, fighting in battles, and by building wonders. The clan draw pile contains 3 passing of time cards, which, when revealed, advances the game one step closer towards the final battle. The first thing you'll need after opening the box are, of course, the components, which is the namesake of this podcast. So we're going to start there. Let's get the pieces to the table and tell you how they work. First up, in the components, we have 12 clan discs, and these are shuffled during setup in the provided bag. That these will dictate the 7 clans that will be present in your game out of the 12. So you're not going to play with all of them in every game. So right off the bat, we have some extreme variability in your game, and or you can optionally choose the 7 clans you want to play with, and then these are placed on the main board on their designated spots. Next, we have the common supply, which you will create of metals and spirit tokens. There are 21 metals, and you're going to sort these metals by their value. And these are gained when you march in the game, which will explain the meaning of all that here in a little bit. And when your clans are forming an allegiance, you'll gain these medals. And when you gain these, you're going to actually put these on the allegiance card that you get. There are 3 tiers of medals. You have the gold, silver, and bronze medals. So depending on their tier, the gold, silver, or bronze, the one that you receive depends on how many clan cards you have used from your camps to march for that specific allegiance. So the more cards you have in your camps, the better medal you're going to get. Having these medals can also vary the limit to when your clan is overrun, which we'll get into being overrun in a minute. In the game, there are 7 gold medals, and will show a value of 4 when it is not exhausted. When you exhaust this medal, you'll have a value of 3 on the other side, and these guys provide a +1 to your overrun capacity. Next are the 7 silver medals, and they have a 3 on their on their unexhausted side and a 2 on their exhausted side. And these will provide no difference to your overrun capacity, which is a standard of 3. And then we have the bronze medals. There are 7 of those, and these show a 2 on their unexhausted side and a 1 on their exhausted side. And they give you a -1 to your overrun capacity. So when gaining a medal, you will always receive the corresponding amount of spirit when you march and engage in battle. So these medals not only help you with your overrun capacities, they're actually getting you victory points, which is called spirit in this game. And that brings us to those spirit tokens. There's 60 of them in the game. There are 30 of them with a value of 1, 20 of them value 3, and 10 value 10s. And these are the tokens that represent your victory points. And the person with the most of these at the end of the game is going to win the game. So that's the namesake of the game, Spirited, and how you win is getting the most spirit. Kind of makes sense here. Next you have the main board, which is much smaller than your typical game board that you're used to in most of your other board games. You place this in the center of the table as usual. And then to the left side of this, you'll see a wonder display. This will identify the 3 current wonder cards that are available to be built by players. And then to the right of that, there are 7 clan statue slots. And like I said before, this is where those 7 clan tokens or discs are going to sit. And they are simply there just to remind the players of the clans that are in the game, because when you go to build wonders, you need to know all 7 clans that are required to build that wonder. That brings us to the 12 wonder cards that are in the game. There's 1 per clan, and it's associated to that specific empire. But essentially, you're going to use all of them in each of the games. So, regardless of what 7 clans are in the game, you're going to shuffle all 12 of these cards together, and you're going to place that deck face down near the main board, and then you are going to reveal 3 of these, and these are going to be placed face up on their slots on that main board I just discussed. And these are going to offer a variable amount of spirit and also a one-time or an ongoing benefit to you and your empire. And we'll get to the specifics of that when we get into the gameplay. Next, we have the 4 double-sided time track tiles, and these are placed towards the center of the table near that main board. And this is going to track the progression of the game, dictated by the passing of time cards. The amount of players in the game will dictate how you orient these time track tiles, and it will also identify when a battle will occur at the end of the current player's turn. That brings us to the hourglass meeple. There's 1 of these, and it is placed on the time track tiles that you just laid down, and it's going to identify the current progression of the passing of time cards that are being shuffled into the deck. And when this reaches the last spot of the time track, it's actually going to trigger the end of the game. Next, you have 12 allegiance cards, and there is 1 per clan in the game. There are 12 clans, obviously, and you are going to use the cards that match the clan disc tokens that were put out on the main board. These are displayed below the main board and are going to be taken by players when they march and form allegiances. When you gain these, they will be placed on or beside your city board and will provide variable benefits to your city, but at a cost of covering up of your starting city benefits, which this will make much more sense in a minute. And then you have 120 clan cards, and there are 10 cards per clan. And you're going to take the 10 cards for the 7 clans in the game, and then you're going to shuffle this deck up and place it face down on the table just near the main board, and make sure you leave space for a discard pile. And these clan cards, these are pretty much the heart of the game, and they're going to provide different effects and benefits or abilities depending on where they are put at in your city. So Think of them as like multi-use cards because you can use them for different things where they're at. Then we have those 3 passing of time cards I mentioned a minute ago, and these are shuffled into the clan deck after the players have taken their cards for setup, which is outlined in the rulebook. So depending on where players are at in turn order is going to dictate their card setup, and then you're going to shuffle these 3 passing of time cards in that deck after that's done. Then you have 6 city boards because this game goes up to 6 players, and each player is going to get one of these city boards, and the players are going to use these to manage their empire, and it's going to essentially identify their clan cards depending on where they're placed, because where these cards are placed dictates pretty much thematically what they represent around your city. So they're either going to be on your road or in your camps, or they can even be in your hand. So on the board itself, you'll have your home province and then 3 slots for allegiance cards. And then the leftmost area is your home province, and it simply provides gameplay reminders for things that are going to happen in the game, like being overrun, which is not a good thing. We'll get into that in a second. About engaging in normal battles, and then there's some specific rules for that final battle at the end of the game. To the right of this are 3 slots for your allegiance cards, but there isn't really a limit to the amount of allegiances you can have. It's just there's the first 3 that you take in the game are going to cover up your starting benefits. And then in these 3 slots, you'll see some reminders of the benefits you will receive if you are overrun or if you are engaging in a battle. Above your city board, you will have a row of clan cards that are revealed to your city, and this is considered your road. You can just think of these as kind of like wandering clans around your empire coming and showing up on your road. And then these cards are going to eventually end up in your camp, which will be taken by you, or some other players can take them also, or they can even cause your city to be overrun if you have too many of these wandering clans around your city. That was above your city board. Now you have below your city board, which you will have an area for some stacked cards called your camps. And these are the clans you have invited into your empire from your roads, and you're hoping to eventually build an allegiance with these guys. And then this allows you to gain those medals and spirit and allegiance cards I talked about. And then remember, these allegiance cards are going to be placed on your city board itself once it's full. Also below your city board, you will have space to house the wonders that you built, and we'll speak about those here more in a minute also. So as you play the game, you will also have like clan cards in your hand that you'll group into your hand, and you can play those cards at specific times. So yeah, just to recap, they can be on your roads, your camps, or your hand. Next we have the 6 double-sided player aids. These guys, these are pretty much a must-have in this game, and you'll quickly learn that in a second as I talk about terms and iconography. Especially on your first couple games, you'll absolutely need to use these guys. So there are 1 player aid per player, and it's going to outline the actions you take in the game and the iconography and terms you will find on the clan cards. There's 2 sides. There's an action side, and then there's like there's the action and gameplay side, and then on the other side is more the iconography side, I'm going to call it. So on this action gameplay side, we're going to get into the specifics of each of these in a minute, but I'm going to highlight kind of the flow of the game that's represented on these player aids on this side of the card. So I'm going to call it the action gameplay side, and it's kind of it's a flow chart that details how the flow of a turn goes. And the first thing you'll do is what we call a road check, and you're going to check your road at the beginning of your turn regardless of what action you choose. You're going to have to do this, it's required, and this will ensure you have clans available on your road, but may also cause your city to be overrun. and then it's going to outline the flow of your turn depending on what action you choose. The first and most common action you'll choose is to do the play and scout action. And then again, with all these, I'm going to get into the specifics, but essentially you'll be playing cards from your hand and dealing with clans on your road if you do that. The second action you can take is the building a wonder action. So if you diversify the clans in your city and you're on your way to build, you're on your way to build a world wonder, but you're also taking a risk of overrunning your city. So that's the push your luck element of it. And then the third and last action on this flowchart is the march action, which you are wanting to do this to form allegiances with clans you have recruited into your camps, and these will earn you medals and spirit. And then after you march, you're going to do this thing called regrouping, which is regrouping your clans in your city. And then lastly, regardless of the action you did, you will have to do what they call summon new clan cards into your road at the end of your turn. That was the action and gameplay side. If you flip the card over, you're going to see an iconography explanation, and it's going to show you obviously the icons and terms within the game. This is much needed, like I just said before. These are things you're going to see on cards as you go through the game. And getting used to the symbols is kind of a major hurdle in learning this game right off the bat. But this player aid is going to help you tremendously. So make sure you utilize it. I'm going to give you a description of what is on the card, but we'll get a little bit deeper during the gameplay. And again, just like any audio format, I totally understand that some of this is not real intuitive, but it's important to understand and know how the game plays. So the first term is play. This is a lightning bolt symbol that signifies that you will play one card from your hand, or play one card, and it's usually from your hand. The next term is rally, this is a paw print symbol, and it signifies that you're going to place one card into your hand, and it's usually from your road, but sometimes can be from elsewhere. So that was play, and then you have rallying your troops into your hand. Next term is recruiting, and this is a tent icon, and this signifies that you will place one card into your camps. So you're recruiting people into your into your camps, usually from your road, but can possibly be from elsewhere also. So that was recruit. Next is build. This is an archway symbol signifying that you remove one card of each clan to build a wonder, and we'll get into the specifics of that in a minute. And then we have the march term. This is a trumpet symbol, and it signifies that you will use clan cards in your camps to forge allegiances. Then you have reveal, which is it's a card symbol with an arrow signifying that you will reveal clan cards from the draw pile to your road. Next you will see maneuver, which is a double arrow symbol signifying you can swap one card between your hand and your road. Then we have remove, which is a card symbol with an X and signifies that you remove one clan card to the discard pile. And then we have a shield. A shield is a symbol and signifies a face down clan card that you put on your road, which protects your clans from being overrun and taken from other people. And then we have overrun symbol, which is a red skull, and it signifies that a certain effect is associated if your city is overrun. This is your clan's limit on your road and is usually 3, but can possibly change, most likely due to those medals. And then the last term is battle. So this is a sword symbol, and it signifies that a certain effect which will be resolved during a battle. And then this is essentially dictated by the time track. Certain times that hourglass is going to land on a sword symbol, and it's going to cause a battle. So that's all the game components, actually the gameplay components. There are a couple other things in the box that don't do too much with gameplay. There are some card dividers that they put in there, 14 of them, to help identify the cards. There's a bag for storing and mixing those clan discs at the beginning of the game. There's your standard rule book. There's a solo rule sheet and a solo die in there. Alright, and that's all the components, and you may have noticed that it is mainly cards. So this is first and foremost a card game, but how you manage your hand and your city is kind of where the decision space is going to come in. And that brings us to that decision space, which is in the gameplay. Let's see how the game actually plays. So the first thing you're going to need to figure out as far as gameplay is managing your play area, because that's where most of the game takes place, is that city board of yours and managing kind of that area. And there are some terms applied to this, which is effectively managing your empire or your city. So first we'll talk about managing your play area. We're going to go back to your play area just to ensure that you understand like how those cards will be used around your city board, yada yada, all that good stuff. So this is important to understand the rules of the game, so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into those terms I just went off. So first up, we're going to talk about your road. This is that area above your player board, and most clan cards are either going to be adding to your road when they're played, or they can be added to your opponent's roads. Your road can be impacted by other players, but rest assured, the designers make sure you know that your camps and your hand are always safe. So your road is the only thing that can be affected by other players. Then you have shields. These are face down cards on your road, and these are going to help protect the shielded clans from overrunning or being impacted by opponents. Let's talk about that fateful overrunning. This brings us to where your cards, essentially those clans have overrun your civilization. So if any clan has 3 or more cards on your road, they are going to overrun you. And this will result in all cards on your road and in your camps being removed. So you need to try to prevent this from happening. And this threshold of 3, like I said before, can also be increased or decreased by certain game effects. Next, you have card stacks. When you have multiple cards of the same clan on your road, be sure to stack them together just to save room, and it kind of signifies the stacking of your clans in your camps or on your road, and just help save space. Then you have allegiances. And this next term is like understanding how those allegiances work, and these guys are going to be stored on your board along with their medals, and you can hold 3 on your board, and then you can hold the rest of them just off your board somewhere to the side. Next are your camps. Below your city board is where you're going to place your clan cards into camps. You can have a max of up to 2 camps, and each camp must be for cards of a single clan. But some effects can place cards face down into the camps, which these are now going to act as a wild if that's the case. And then once the cards are placed into your camp, you cannot freely move these cards between or combine them or anything. They're pretty much set there until you build an allegiance. And then you have wonder cards. These are the wonders of your cities, and wonders are going to give you spirit and an immediate effect when built. Once resolved, keep them face up near your city board. Next is your hand. So obviously this is where the cards are going to be in your hand, and don't show these to the other players. There is no hand limit, but you will be forced to discard down to 5 anytime there's a battle. So keep that in mind as you go into a battle, that you are going to have to discard down to 5. Next you have Spirit, which is obviously the name of the game, and it's the most important thing. So as you gain Spirit, keep it nearby your city board for all players to see. It's not hidden information, and you can, there's plenty of tokens to where you can freely exchange these from the supply. And that's essentially managing your game area in those terms. Just kind of understand how the game plays and managing your empire. So we're going to get into the soul of this game now. We're going to get into the spirit. So hang tight here. We're going to roll right into some more gameplay overview. So Spirited is played over an undetermined number of turns. Starting from the first player and continuing clockwise around the table, each player is going to take their turn in full, followed by the player to their left, your standard turn order. And then this continues turn after turn until that final battle is triggered. And then there are a few steps to go through on each turn, but generally speaking, on each turn, you're either going to be either scouting, building, or marching. But at the very first thing you have to do is a road check. So at the start of your turns, you first perform a road check. If you have fewer than 2 face-up cards, which face-up, not shields, that are on your road, you're going to have to reveal cards from the top of the clan draw pile onto your road until you have exactly 2. After this, check for clans on your road that have reached or exceeded their overrun limit. If any clans qualify for this, you're going to have to rally, which means you're going to draw to hand the minimum number of cards from those clans so that they no longer reach their overrun limit. So if you don't have up to 2 cards on your road, you're going to do a road check, draw some cards, and then if they overrun you, you're going to take some of those cards into hand. Clans reach their overrun limit on your road if they have 3 or more face-up cards. However, this number can be increased or decreased by medals and card effects, like I said before. So for example, if you have a gold allegiance with a clan, they're going to require 1 additional card to overrun. So now that is 4 instead of 3. This means they'll only overrun you with their 4 cards, like I just said, on your clan, on your road. And then after your road check, you're going to choose to scout or build or march. So if you choose to scout, you may first play 1 card from your hand. That's a may. And to do so, you play the card down in front of you and resolve its printed effect. And all these clan cards, depending on their faction, they all have different effects. So unless the card states that it must be placed somewhere else, you're just going to simply place it into the clan discard pile. And like I just said, the clan cards come with a wide range of effects to let you do different things like rally, recruit, shield, and different other things. You will find a list of all the icons and keywords and some examples near the back of the rulebook if there's ever any questions. If you have no cards on your road after the play step, you're going to have to reveal exactly 2 cards from the top of the clan draw pile onto your road, and then you're going to do that scout. So to scout, you must either rally or recruit 1 face-up card from your road. When you rally, you're going to take a card from your road and place it into your hand. And if you're recruiting somebody, you're going to take a card from your road and place it into one of your camps. Granted, it was previously empty or contained only face down cards, or at least 1 card of the same clan is being recruited. Essentially, you just can't have more than 2 camps, and 1 camp is going to be all of the same card, unless you have a card face down, which is a wild. And then after you do this thing called summoning, which you do at the end of your turn. So at the end of your turn, you're going to summon, and this is much like a road check. You're just going to reveal 2 cards from the top of the clan draw pile and place them face up onto your road. And remember to stack the cards of the same clans together, and then you're going to check to see if you were overrun. Hopefully not. If no clans are overrunning, your turn is over and play just simply continues to the next player. And if 1 or more clans are overrun, you must resolve that being overrun. And we'll get to that more in a second. So you may notice that you're always having 2 cards at the top of your in your road, top of your city board. At the beginning of your turn, if somebody in between your turns taking a card, some effects are going to make your road change. So that's why you must always do the road check and summoning at the end of your turn. Alright, next, if you choose not to scout, you will be doing a build action. So to build a wonder, you must use one card of each of the 7 clans in the game. And the clan discs on the main board are going to serve as a reminder for what clans are in the game to help you out here. And these cards may be used from your road, your camps, or your hand. So if you're just amassing a bunch of cards and you're diversifying that with all the clans in the game, you most likely want to build a wonder here. And only face-up cards may be used from your road or camps, so you can't use the shields or the wilds to build these wonders. So you're going to remove the cards being used, placing them into their discard pile. You'll select one of the 3 wonders from the main board and place it near your city board. You're going to gain the spirit indicated on the wonder card and resolve its printed effect. And then you're going to reveal a new wonder card from the top of the draw pile to replace the card that you just took. And then after this, you're going to do the summon like I just explained a second ago. And if you don't choose to scout or build, you're going to do a march action. Alright, so if you don't scout or build, you're going to do the march, like I just said, and you're going to use cards in your camps to forge allegiances. To forge an allegiance, you must have enough cards of a chosen clan in a camp to gain a medal. You may forge multiple allegiances during the same march if possible, but let's first see how an allegiance works, because it's kind of intricate here. So if the allegiance card you wish to gain is still below the main board, you must have either 2, 3, or 4 or more cards of that specific clan in your camps to gain a bronze, silver, or gold medal, respectively. So you're going to collect the highest medal you qualify for and place it with the allegiance card on the leftmost empty space of your city board, or to the right if you already have 3 or more allegiances. You may also march for an allegiance held by any player, including yourself. In order to march, you must use at least 1 more card than the value of the medal on that allegiance card. So if your opponent or yourself previously marched and their medal is currently sitting at a 2, you're going to need at least 3 cards in your camps to be able to take that allegiance card from them, or reform your allegiance with somebody that you already have an allegiance with. So if you form an allegiance with a clan that is held by one of your opponents, they get a little bit of a consolation prize, and you're going to have to place 1 face-up card from your camp that you use of that clan, and then you're going to give that to your opponent, and they're going to put it into their hand. Whenever a player loses an allegiance, even to themselves, that the allegiance's previous medal is going to be returned to the supply before the new medal is claimed. And when losing your allegiances, just simply slide those remaining on your city, and any off your city board to the left to fill any empty spaces if needed. So after forging 1 or more allegiances, you're going to gain spirit from the supply equal to the value of the medals you just collected. So if you gained a 4 sized medal, you're going to get 4 spirit when you get that, and also during a battle you'll have to exhaust one of those. Alright, next we have the regroup. So after marching you must regroup, and to do this you're going to remove all the cards from your road and camps, placing them into your clan discard pile. Then you're going to reveal 2 cards from the top of the clan draw pile onto your road, and then there is an exception, and you do not check for overrunning clans after this. And then that brings us to that overrunning. So let's talk about that dreadful overrunning we keep mentioning. Alright, here comes that pesky overrunning of your civilization. So anytime you are overrun after summoning, you're going to resolve all the overrun effects on your city board and on your allegiance cards, which will be represented by that red skull icon. And then the home province on your city board always provides the following effect for you. So you get to rally one card of each of the overrunning clans from your road. And then this is rallying is bringing that card into your hand. And if you have no allegiance cards, you will also gain 1 spirit. And then you can rally up to 2 cards, which may include face down cards that will be removed from your camps when regrouping. With only 1 allegiance card though, you will not gain any spirit, and with 2 allegiance cards, you will only rally 1 of the removed cards. So essentially what this means is the more allegiances you have in this game, the less consolation you get from your home board during an overrun. After resolving any overrun effects, you will then regroup as explained during marching, which is removing cards from your road and your camps, and then you have to reveal 2 new cards to your road. And those were the 3 actions: scouting, building, and marching. Obviously, marching is the most complex one, really, but it's really not that bad. Once you get used to it, it's just kind of following the flow of what happens when you get an allegiance. So again, it's the most convoluted, but it's not that bad. So next thing we are going to talk about is the game flow and that passing of time. So anytime you reveal a passing of time card from the clan draw pile, again, these were shuffled in randomly at the beginning of the game, you just simply place it into the discard pile, but then that's going to move that hourglass one spot up on the track. And then after this, you're going to just keep revealing cards into your road as you would normally. And then the passing of time card does not reduce how many cards you have to reveal onto your road. And then if the hourglass moved onto a space with a sword battle icon, a battle will be resolved at the end of the current turn when that was resolved. And then we'll get to the battles here in a second. The time track is broken up into 3 sections, with each section separated by taller lines between the spaces. This kind of just represents 1 full cycle of the clan draw pile. And then as there are 3 passing of time cards, you can kind of begin to anticipate how likely it is will be for one of these cards to be revealed, but you really don't know. And that brings us to the battle, because like I just said, when that hourglass moves to that battle icon, you have to resolve that battle. So these occur at the end of turns where the hourglass moves onto that space. All players are going to resolve battle effects simultaneously, or if you have to, you can do it in turn order if there are some disputes on anything in the game on those effects. Let's try not to have any real battles across the table. This game's not really that much of a take that game. You can affect people's roads and stuff, and you are going to be doing some negative things, but with the theme, it's kind of all lighthearted, so don't take it too seriously. Resolve all battle effects from your home province first, and then you're going to resolve any effects from your allegiances that are both on your city board and on your allegiance cards themselves. So some of those allegiance cards will have battle effects on them. So for your home province, you must first perform a road check, and then you're going to discard down to 5 cards in your hand, and you get to score one of the medals or replace an exhausted medal with a refreshed bronze medal. So to score a medal, it must currently be refreshed with its face up. So essentially what this means is, as you go through the flow of the game, you're trying to have allegiances before a battle occurs. That way you can score that medal. But if you score that medal, you're going to exhaust it. So on the next battle, unless somebody has taken this allegiance from you, you're going to have the option to refresh it. Or most likely you're going to try and score a different medal that you have. And then when you score this, you just simply gain spirit equal to its printed value from the supply, and then you exhaust the medal, which is simply turning it face down. And then exhausting a medal always decreases its value by 1. So if it was a 4, it's now going to be a 3. and that just it makes it easier for you or any other player to form an allegiance with this clan. But if you did not score a medal, you must instead replace one of those exhausted medals with a bronze medal if possible. And then you're going to return the exhausted medal to the supply face up, and then place a new refreshed bronze medal on the allegiance card. Pretty simple. What this means is you essentially will have at least a bronze medal for your weaker allegiances. But this doesn't provide any immediate spirit if you choose to if you choose to replace a medal instead of exhausting one to get the spirit. So if you have no allegiance cards at all, you may also recruit one card face down from your road, rally one card from your road, and perform a maneuver. So those are some consolations if you don't have any allegiances during a battle. With one allegiance card, you may rally one card from your road and maneuver, and with two allegiance cards, you are only going to be able to maneuver. So like I said before, the more allegiances you have, the less benefits you are going to get from your home board. And then simply once all players have finished resolving their battle effects, play just continues to the next turn. Let's talk a little more on those allegiances a little bit, because they are very important in the game, and essentially no civilization is going to last without allegiances, right? So each allegiance card has its own unique ability for that player that holds it. Some of these abilities are activated from certain events. Overrun effects activate anytime you are overrun by clans on your road. Regrouping and marching effects may be resolved on the same turn that they are gained, unless stated otherwise, and any battle effects are going to be resolved in any order during battle on these allegiance cards. So covering up your home base benefits provide you with variable player powers from your allegiance cards. We'll dive into these cards after the rules. I think that's an important piece of this game, so we're going to dive into it. But what happens if the clan draw deck is empty? So if you ever need to reveal a card from the clan draw pile but there are no cards left to reveal, you're simply just going to shuffle all the cards in the clan discard pile to form a new clan draw pile, and then just continue revealing cards as needed. Eventually though, the hourglass is going to reach the end of the time track, and it will be time for that final battle. So when that hourglass reaches that last time track spot, and final battle will occur at the end of that player's turn, and then you are going to carry out all normal battle effects as normal, and then you get to recruit any number of cards from your hand into your camps that you can legally place, so if they can match what's already in your camps. And then after this, you're going to gain one spirit token from the supply for every 2 cards in your camps, and then this brings you to the end of the game. The game ends immediately after that final battle, and the player with the most spirit is the winner. If there is a tie, the tied player with the most refreshed medals, those that are not face down, is the winner. And then if there's still a tie, the tied player with the most cards still in their hand is the winner. After that, if there's still a tie, then it's just a shared victory. So that was the rules of the game. Before we move on to the mechanisms, I do want to take a moment to look at the different card effects that, just to give you an idea of how these multi-use cards can offer the potential for variable combos and gameplay. I know we're running long today, but that's okay. We're already at it. We're going to get into the specific card effects and touch on those wonders. Because it's important to understand this for the theme and mechanisms. So here we go. Let's get into those card effects and the wonders. Alright, I'm pretty much just going to go down the list and state the civilization and their allegiance cards, clan cards, and wonder cards effects, with a little bit more history to go with it. So first up, we have the Aztecs, and their allegiance card effect is if you form an allegiance with the Aztecs, you will have to summon one extra card when forced to regroup, but you then get to recruit someone from your road into your camps. And the clan card effect is if you play this card, you will place this card onto your road to get to rally one card of a different clan from an opponent's road. And their wonder in this game is the Tenochtitlan, which I'm going to butcher. Tenochtitlan. Wonder card effect is you get to place up to 2 cards that were removed for this build onto your roads as shields. And then, again, I'm going to try this one more time. Tenochtitlan. It was the spectacular capital of the Aztec Empire, founded in 1325 on a swampy island in Lake Texcoco. It featured floating gardens, also known as chinampas, grand temples, and causeways. The city was razed by Spanish conquistadors in 1521, and its ruins now lie directly beneath the modern-day Mexico City. The Babylons, their allegiance card is going to allow you to shield and face down cards in your camps can now be used as any clan when you build. And then the clan card effect is you get to recruit one card face down from your hand. Their wonder is the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And that card effect is going to optionally turn all cards in one of your camps face down. And then the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are celebrated as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, yet they remain a profound archaeological enigma because no definitive physical evidence of their existence has actually ever been found. So unlike the other 6 ancient wonders, they are the only marvel whose exact location and reality are still heavily disputed by historians and archaeologists. Next is the Chinese, and you may use Chinese cards as any clan for building if you form an allegiance with them. Their clan card, if you do its play effect, is you get to reveal 2 cards immediately, and then you will reveal 2 less cards when summoning. Their wonder is the Great Wall, and that effect, when you build this, is you get to forge an unclaimed bronze allegiance, or if all allegiances have been forged, you instead just simply gain 4 spirit. And the Great Wall of China is the world's largest man-made structure, spanning an archaeological total of 21,196 kilometers, or 13,170 miles, across northern China. This defensive network stretches across 15 provinces, municipalities, and autonomous regions, undulating over mountains and deserts and plateaus from the Bohai Sea in the east to the Gobi Desert in the west. And rather being a single unbroken line, it is a complex, discontinuous network of multi-era walls, trenches, natural barriers, and defensive watchtowers. Next is the Egyptian Empire, and their allegiance card is going to you may play an additional card on turns that you scout. Their clan card, you get to place 1 card from your road into an opponent's hand, and then you get to rally 1 card from their road. And then their wonder card is the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the effect you get from this is you get to refresh 1 medal, or you get to just simply gain 1 spirit. And the Great Pyramid of Giza is the oldest and largest of the 3 pyramids in the Giza Pyramid Complex, and the only remaining monument of the original 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was built around 2600 BC during the 4th dynasty of Egypt's Old Kingdom, and it was constructed as a monumental royal tomb for the pharaoh Khufu. Next is Greece. Their allegiance card effect is that you get to rally one card from your camps before regrouping after you march. And then their clan card allows you to remove one card from one of your camps or from any road. And their wonder card is the Parthenon, and then that effect will allow you to place up to 2 cards from roads of different opponents onto your road. And then the Parthenon is an ancient marble temple on the Acropolis in Athens, Greece. It was built between 447 and 432 BCE, and it was dedicated to Athena, that we talked about, the city's patron goddess. And it is renowned for its classical Doric architecture and harmonious proportions. It remains a universal symbol of Western civilization and democracy. The Japanese, if you form an allegiance with the Japanese, when you are overrun, if you had 2 camps, you do not remove cards from one chosen camp when regrouping. And then if you play the clan card, you get to rally 1 card from your road, and then you have to reveal 1 extra card when you summon. And their wonder card is the Himeji Castle, and the effect you get from this is each opponent may rally 1 card from their road. Then you may rally 1 card from roads to each opponent that did that. And the Himeji Castle, it's located in Himeji City. It's the Hyogo Prefecture, and Japan's largest, most visited, and best preserved feudal fortress. It is nicknamed Shirasagijo, the White Heron Castle, for its brilliant white plaster, facade, and elegant silhouette resembling a bird in flight. It was registered in 1993 as one of Japan's very first UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and remarkably, unlike most Japanese castles, it survived centuries of earthquakes, fires, and even World War II bombings entirely intact. Next, the Rome Allegiance card. If you form an allegiance with them, when regrouping after you march, you optionally get to keep cards and camps that you did not forge allegiances with. So essentially, you get to keep cards in one of those camps. If you play a clan card, you get to recruit 1 card from your road. Their wonder card is the Colosseum of Rome, and then their effect is that you get to optionally recruit 1 card from any road when you gain this wonder. And the Roman Colosseum originally was known as the Flavian Amphitheater. It is the largest ancient amphitheater ever built and stands as an iconic architectural marvel in the center of Rome, Italy. And it was commissioned by Emperor Vespasian around 70 and 72 AD and completed under his successor Titus in 80 AD, and it remains a premier symbol of the Roman Empire's power and ingenuity. Next, the Norse Allegiance card is going to, it doesn't occupy a space in your city. So essentially, if you gain this allegiance, it's going to allow you to gain the benefits of your city even though you have this allegiance, not covering that up. If you play the clan card, you get to place this card onto an opponent's road to recruit 1 card from their road. Then they may recruit or rally 1 card from your road. Their wonder is the Longhouse, and that effect is you get to recruit any number of cards still on your road before summoning. The Norse longhouses were long, narrow, timber-framed Viking-age homes and ranged from 50 to 250 feet long, and their tapered boat-like walls were made of wood, wattle, and daub, or turf. The interiors featured a central hearth for warmth and raised sleeping platforms, and they often sheltered both families and livestock. The Olmecs, their allegiance card is if you have fewer than 4 cards on your road before your road check, reveal cards till you have exactly 4. Their clan card is that you get to remove any number of cards from one of your camps to recruit up to that number of cards from your road. Their wonder, like we talked about during their history, is the Colossal Head, and that effect is that you optionally get to score 1 medal you hold already, and then you exhaust it. The Olmec colossal heads are massive stone representations of human heads carved from single basalt boulders by the ancient Olmec civilization of Mesoamerica, and it's dating primarily from 1200 BCE to 400 BCE. These monolithic monuments are widely considered the hallmark of the Olmec art and are among the earliest large-scale sculptures found in the Americas. Next, we have the Persians. If you form an allegiance here, shields on your road may now be recruited face down to your camps. Essentially, you're acting as a wild. If you play the clan card, you get to shield one clan on your road with this card. And their wonder card is the Tak Kasra, which the effect is each opponent may shield one card on their road using another card from their road. And then the Tak Kasra, also known as the Arch of Ctesiphon, is a monumental Sasanian-era Persian monument located near the modern town of Salman Pak, Iraq, standing roughly 35 kilometers south of Baghdad. It features one of the largest single-span vaults of unreinforced brickwork in the world, and the arch is the only visible above-ground structure remaining from the ancient city of Ctesiphon, which served as a majestic capital of the Persian Empire. The Sao, on the Sao Allegiance card, if you were to recruit from your road, you may instead recruit from your hand and reveal one less card when summoning. And the clan card will allow you to place this card onto your road, rally one card from your road, and then optionally play another card, which is pretty powerful. Their wonder card is the Clay Granary. The effect is that each opponent may recruit one card from their road, then you gain one spirit for each opponent that did that, with a maximum of 3. And the Sao civilization, like we talked about, they flourished around the Lake Chad basin in Central Africa, spanning parts of modern-day Chad, Cameroon, and Nigeria. They are especially renowned for their monumental clay architecture, specifically for their towering earth granaries and jar-shaped mud dwellings, which is depicted on this card. And essentially this just showcases their incredible indigenous engineering. And here we go for the Scythians. Their allegiance card is that during battle you do not discard any cards from your hand, and you optionally get to rally one card from your road. Their clan card will allow you to swap one card on your road with one card on an opponent's road. And their wonder card is the Kurgan, which the effect is rally one card that was removed per opponent, then place one card from your hand onto each opponent's road. A Scythian Kurgan is an ancient monumental burial mound built by the nomadic Scythian people of the Eurasian steppe, ranging from the modest mounds to massive 20-meter high structures. They protected deep subterranean chambers. They contained elite leaders, sacrificed horses, and staggeringly rich grave goods, including intricate goldwork, weapons, and textiles. Alright, so now you hopefully get the idea of how to play Spirited by Garphill Games. A lot of terminology we went through. It is really not that heavy of a game, and you can see that I just went through a bunch of the card effects. That's where kind of the heart of the game's coming out, is using those card effects for your specific strategy. So once you get those card effects down and understand that iconography, I think you will be on your way to kind of understanding the flow of this game and its mechanisms. And that's where we are getting at now. We are going to talk about those mechanisms and get into our final verdict. Alright, now we know the rules to play Spirited. You can probably tell the importance of the hand management and card play in this game. Being able to play those right cards at the best moment, carefully plan what clans to build allegiances with, is crucial to being successful at this game. Along with that, you also have to push your luck and shoot for building a world wonder. Also, And oh yeah, you don't forget to be prepared to score medals during battles. So how do these gears actually turn behind the scenes? Are playing those cards in the set collection really like managing an empire? Let's zoom in on the core mechanisms that hold this entire experience together and see how they hold up with the theme. So first off, we'll talk about the card play. The key mechanism in Spirited, I'm sure you have gathered so far, is in the card play and how you manage this with your clans around your city. I'm going to talk about these different aspects of card play in different categories. And these categories I'm going to talk about are card management, push your luck, set collection, the game timer, and the multiple uses of the cards in general. So card management, we talked about the different areas of your city, such as the roads, camps, and then your hand. Managing the different aspects of these and how they differ and gaining points can be thematically tied into managing an empire overall. It's there loosely, but players could get the sense of kind of civ building, if you want to call it that, and that decision space or of where to focus your efforts. I don't know. What do you think? Is that too much of a stretch, you think? Next is the push your luck aspect. So as you welcome new clans to your road and then decide what you are going to do with them, this offers this interesting push and pull of your luck, which I find pretty thematic in the sense that it kind of mirrors the uncertainty of events that would take place around your civilization. It's a simple mechanic, but that tension of if you overrun and then lose almost everything is somehow satisfying. And then they do offer some consolation benefits for this also, so you're not completely taken out of the game, but it can still kind of feel devastating, but it's also satisfying at the same time. It's so weird. So that may be a barrier for those that don't like punishment in their game for pushing their luck. Next, we have the set collection aspect of this game. It's kind of how you gain those allegiances with certain clans and building the wonders. So gathering multiple cards of one clan kind of simulates securing deep political loyalty and massive military backing from that specific faction. Conversely though, sacrificing one card from every clan to build a wonder represents an act of like ultimate diplomatic like unity, bringing all the disparate cultures of the ancient world together to build that lasting monument. It's kind of what it feels like. Next, we have the game timer, and we all know that time is the ultimate force that tells if an empire has reached their true glory, so that's where this thematically ties in. The passing of time cards that are shuffled into the deck adds a touch to the uncertainty, similar to the overrunning of your civilization. Players are not in control of the game length, and this brings that tension on if an empire would face, not knowing if their inevitable doom or lack thereof, depending on if they win or not. It kind of ties the unpredictable battles in there and have a pretty thematic progression on your specific empire. And then what about those multi-use cards? So first off, one thing I love in games are multi-use cards, and this game brings that mechanic out with all the different things you can do with your clan cards. The multi-use cards bring that asymmetry of the factions and their specific strategy, and the decision space on how you use those cards, like I said, in card management, brings that small amount of theme on having your own civilization with their quote own story. All right, so those were the mechanisms I was able to kind of pull out of the game Spirited and thematically tie them in. Let's wrap it up with the mechanisms, and then we'll get to that final verdict. So obviously I had to take some leaps in pulling the theme out of this, it's strictly a card management game, but I think we can all agree that the designers made some design decisions to ensure the theme was somewhat present in a fairly quick card combo game. We'll see how this all holds up through the final verdict and see how how I think this game deserves, where it deserves to be on the thematic scale itself. So, is Spirited full of spirit, or is it just a useless artifact that deserves to be buried in the sands of time? Let's find out. Alright, every episode we wrap up by placing our game on the thematic scale. We tie all the things we talked about together today, and we weigh in on how well the game's design actually meets the theme. This scale, it ranges from 1 to 5 for mechanical integration. This is how well the mechanisms bring out the theme in the game. We're going to talk about component immersion, which this looks at how well the components function and if they help bring you into the theme. Next, we'll look at narrative evolution. This is how well does the game encourage players to bring the story to life. The flavor text impact. Did the designers include any flavor text to help the theme come out? The thematic decisions. What about the decision space? Do the decisions you make match what it actually would feel like in the world of the game? We'll talk about the tension and pacing. Does the flow of the game keep the players engaged? And then we'll talk about the science or history accuracy, which is my personal favorite of the themes that we're going to judge. See if it stays true to the facts overall. And then we're going to look at the overall score, which leans more on the kind of just the overall enjoyment of the gameplay. But I think it still deserves a spot on the scale. Then we're going to round this all out with the final weigh-in by taking the average of all these and give us the actual rating of the theme to mechanics on the thematic scale. So first up is the mechanical integration. The rules of gameplay and the mechanisms intertwined with this are not very thematic in the terms of a civilization-like game, which I feel like they're kind of going for with the theme. I'm not too sure if I would even call it a civilization game other than the theme that was put on it. Mechanically, though, you can think of your player area and your city board as your own clan, or civilization as they have different areas where you place cards that are thematically tied into what they're doing. You can think of this as your territory, and your clans are showing up and moving around your roads. And the roads are kind of a vulnerable area, and you want to eventually recruit these into your camps to form an allegiance, or allow them to be recruited by the other players to just get them out of your territory. So if you allow too many wanderers, they're going to deny your allegiance and just overrun you, which is kind of thematic in a sense. But with all that said, though, I don't think these mechanics are very immersive and really bring out the theme. I love the theme in general, the history of all these different clans. That's why this episode is going well over 2 hours now. I just enjoyed learning about that stuff. I love the history type of games, but this specifically, it didn't really bring out the theme. So as far as Spirited and that mechanical integration to the theme, it's a 2 for me. A little bit lower on the scale for that. Let's talk about the components. So the components in this game kind of help bring out the theme. The things that come to mind are the time track and that main board and the player boards and the cards. The presentation on this thing is just fantastic. I mean, the art. But first up, the time track. So just like any great empire that has reigned throughout history, time brings their ultimate demise with the battles fought throughout. This time track represents the progression of this, and just like the uncertainty of real life, players don't really know exactly when the next battle will be or when the end game is going to be triggered due to the randomness of the time progression cards that are shuffled in the deck. It brings that tension of managing your civilization with the uncertainty of battles that are going to come your way. So that's kind of thematic in regards to that component. The main board of this game is small, but I mean, that's not a big deal. And the overall footprint of this game is pretty small. all things considered. But they managed to actually fit enticing art on the boards and on all the cards that help bring out the theme. So on the main board, we see like a typical depiction of a coastline empire with ships coming ashore and archways leading into cities. The presentation, although it's subtle, it's going to help the players feel the civilization theme, in my opinion. Next are those player boards. Also with your player boards, there's like a panoramic view of your city that most civilizations would have. If you're just imagine looking over on top of a hill at your empire, and then you'll see your roads, your farms, the public squares, etc. This thematically brings out different aspects of managing your own empire. Who does it look like a good player board? I do want to mention here that they did a great job with providing gameplay reminders that keep you engaged in playing the game rather than searching through a rulebook, which I find very important in this game. So what about the cards? I think most importantly in regards to the components and theme, are the different clan cards and their associated anthropomorphic animals. We went into detail in this podcast today. Yes, every clan card is the same for each clan, but I think the artist took the time to ensure that the depictions really bring out what those ancient empires were all about, especially like in regards to worshiping specific animals. Overall, though, the components are not that thematic and bring the players into the theme, which I'll admit is tough anyways and almost strictly a card game. I know I'm taking some stretches here, and it's coming out that I'm enjoying the theme of this, but when it comes down to on the thematic scale, the components are not really pulling you into it that much. So I'm also going to give this a 2 for the component immersion on the thematic scale. It's pretty much pasted. It's close to being pasted on. I think the designers did the best they could with bringing the game to life with the fairly simple components and mechanisms. But yeah, that's a 2 for me also. So how about the story building and players building that narrative evolution as you play the game? The uncertainty of the time track and the push your luck element of overrunning your city, to me, are what bring the overall arc of any story that could be told throughout this game. That's a huge stretch, though, because honestly, I just don't feel like there's any narrative evolution in this game at all. So the gameplay is fun in my general. We'll get to that in a second, but you're not really building a story, in my opinion. That is not necessarily a bad thing, but this is the thematic scale, and it is what it is. So narrative evolution is an easy one for me. Maybe a tinge of spirit, but no story to really write home about. Next is the flavor text impact. There is no flavor text within this game, so I'm going to just keep this short and sweet and just say that it is a 1 also. There is no flavor text, so I'm just going to move on from here. Alright, what about the thematic decision integration? Is this game really making you make those thematic decisions? The main thematic decisions you're going to make in this game are if you want to push your luck and bring more wanderers onto your roads, and hopefully be able to build a monument or recruit more into your camps, or maybe you just want to play it safe and cash those camps in soon with a little bit lesser of a reward. I think most of the time the decision space is not very huge, as you can get a feeling of the best move to make at that point regarding your actions. There is a small element of tension if you want to push your luck for better rewards. With that, though, the thematic decisions are pretty low in my opinion. Also in this game, this is also coming in at a 2 for the thematic decisions going on. There are surface level dressings of a theme here in regards to the thematic decisions, but not much more than that. Next, let's talk about the tension and pacing in this game. So With the tension and pacing, I'm going to go back to the time track and the passing of the time cards in the deck. The uncertainty is what brings the majority of the tension, but also sometimes you're concerned about the cards and the city of your opponents. I would say that the paying attention to the other players' cities and what they can do brings some thematic elements of running an empire. As any leaders knows that you must keep a sharp eye on your opponents. So that's the theme I'm bringing out here. With that though, the tension and pacing I think is probably the most thematic element of this game. So I'm going to give this a 3 for being a somewhat fast-paced game, and that tension and pacing is kind of keeping you immersed into the theme for what it is. Now let's talk about all the history we just went through today. How does that history hold up? Spirited mostly brings out all the ancient civilizations kind of in an abstracted way. Rather than focusing on the thematic elements of each civilization, I think this is supposed to be bringing out parts of ancient empires and their choices on making allegiances with clans and building wonders. We went through zoolatry of the civilizations and worshipping of animals, which I think is the most compelling by the absolutely wonderful art in this game. But I don't find much of it in the theme at all, which hurts me to say. I mean, the art and the stories are fantastic, but the theme, you don't really see that coming through. I mean, if you didn't know much about this, and generally you'd be like, oh, these are just cool animals on these cards. But I also don't think that's what they're shooting for in this game. I'm going to rate this on how well they stay true to the actual history of these. I think they did a fantastic job with deciding how to depict the civilizations through their animal deities or their the cultural impacts of those animals. But this is also a 3, just because the gameplay doesn't really match those specific civilizations very much specifically. But they made some historically accurate civilizations overall, but I don't see the gameplay really coming through on that. So that was the history. Let's get into the gameplay itself. So it seems like I'm coming off really negative on this, and no, I'm just looking at this at the thematic and the gameplay overall. I have as a 3 also, and that's only because this is a fairly new game and I haven't played it a ton. So I'm interested to see what comes out in the future from this game. So I'm just going to keep it at a 3. When I first saw this game announced, I was instantly intrigued by the theme and what the team at Garphill Games were going to bring through this, because it was kind of different than what they usually do with their games. I think it is well executed here. I've enjoyed most of the games of theirs they've put out, and the South Tigers series is some of my favorite games of all time, actually. And the first couple plays of this was rough for me and for the other players. And I think most players will find that also. The first couple plays may be rough with all the iconography, and the gameplay is not too intuitive at first. I think this is going to turn some people off on the game, but for me, the payoff of putting in the time to understand the general flow of the game is well worth it, in my opinion. As you play the game more, you see how different clans and their specific abilities combo in different ways and just make each game different in their own way, which I think is really cool. If you're going to be teaching this game, it is important for players to understand that they may have to have less exciting turns to save up for better ones by hoarding cards if necessary. Some turns you're just simply picking up a card and that's it. And it may feel a little inefficient, but then at a later time in the game you get to play that card and it does some kind of cool combo, which I think is pretty satisfying. So with that said, with the lightly pasted on theme, some obscure mechanics in there, fantastic art and presentation, I plan on still coming back to this game and look forward to playing it more for sure. I know it seems like I just said it seems like I was negative as far as the theme, but I love civilization games, and to me this isn't a civilization game at all. It just has that theme pasted onto it pretty much. But time will only tell if it gets better. So I'm definitely intrigued to see the other combos that I haven't seen, just due to the randomness of those 7 clans at the beginning of the game. There are some expansions. I have the expansions that came with it when I backed it, and those add even more civilizations that I didn't even touch on today. So yeah, that's pretty exciting to get into that. So all that said, the overall weight on the thematic scale, again, this isn't not like overall how great the game is, it's just how thematic is this game. It's coming in at a 2.125 on our thematic scale. There are some surface level dressings of the theme in there. You just have to essentially admire the presentation of it to get there. Alright, there are my ratings for Spirited on the thematic scale. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on your experiences with this game, if you have played it, and where you stand on the thematic scale yourself. I know this has ran longer than most of my episodes, but if you're still here, I appreciate you sticking it out to learn the history of this game and the mechanics and where it ended up on the thematic scale. Let me know if this is anything you want to share. If there's anything you want to share, just look at my contact info in the show notes, and I'd be happy to talk about these type of things. So yeah, that's Spirited. Hopefully you now know the history behind Zoolatry and ancient civilizations, and just as important, the rules of the game. Next time you look into the eyes of your beloved pet, maybe ask yourself if they're worthy of worship. Maybe you should start worshiping little Fluffy running around the house. Maybe that's what you should be doing. Or maybe you'll go out and build a marble statue if you really love them. Show your pet some love. Go out to your front yard. Take the time to build a marble statue or a clay statue if you really do love your pets. And I'm kidding here. But that's going to be it for today. Let's hit some outro notes, and we're going to be done with the game Spirited and its review today. That's going to be it for today on the periodic table of components. If you enjoyed your time here today, please hit that follow button on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you want to engage with others or just share your thoughts, feel free to leave a comment. If you want to help the show grow, I would greatly appreciate it if you left a positive review wherever you can. You can find me out there on the internets at Periodic Table Pics on Instagram, where I periodically post pictures of the games I'm playing. You can find me on the Periodic Table of Components on Facebook and TPTOC podcast on Blue Sky. Feel free to engage with me on BGG and join the guild. You can find further information regarding this episode and the podcast in the show notes. I'll be back periodically with more history and science of your favorite board games. So until then, keep rolling, keep learning, and keep building stories around the table. I've been your host, Greg. We'll catch you next time.